Welcome to this story, where we step back in time to a peaceful, ancient village. As the day unfolds slowly, we witness the unhurried rhythm of market life. The villagers, with deliberate grace, go about their daily tasks, setting up stalls, arranging freshly harvested fruits and vegetables, and weaving fabrics with skillful hands. Children play gently, laughter mingling with soft conversations, while the gentle hum of the village sets a calming tone. The potter shapes cool clay, the weaver's loom hums with rhythm, and the air is filled with the comforting scent of fresh ribs and baked bread. As the day transitions into night, the market quiets, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, and the peaceful sounds of nature invite rest. This timeless world, where every movement is a meditation, cradles you in a deep sense of calm, guiding you into a peaceful sleep. Welcome to this peaceful journey into an ancient village, where time seems to slow down and life moves at a steady, measured pace. The village, nestled beneath the embrace of towering oak trees, awakens slowly under the soft rays of the rising sun. The first light stretches across the market square, casting long shadows and warming the cobblestones that have felt the weight of countless footsteps over the years. The air is cool, filled with the scent of dew-covered grass and the faintest trace of wood smoke from the fires lit in homes that dot the landscape. As the village stirs from its slumber, the familiar sounds of morning begin to fill the air, gentle murmurs of voices, the soft creak of wooden doors opening, and the rustle of fabric as villagers emerge from their homes, ready to begin their day. Farmers in homespun tunics step out with wicker baskets, their hands steady as they carry freshly gathered produce to the market, their faces calm and focused. The potter moves to his wheel, his hands already covered in clay, shaping the earth into delicate vessels that will soon hold water and grain. Nearby, the weaver sits at her loom, the rhythmic motion of her fingers pulling thread through the wooden beams with practiced grace. As the villagers begin their daily routines, there is no sense of urgency. Its task is carried out with purpose and care, and the entire village seems to pulse with a quiet, deliberate rhythm. Children, their faces still soft with sleep, wander slowly through the square, their eyes wide with curiosity as they watch the adults prepare for the day ahead. The square itself is a living canvas, filled with colorful baskets of fruits, vegetables, and flowers, each item carefully arranged by the vendors. The light shifts slowly as the sun climbs higher, bathing the village in a golden glow that makes the simple earth tones of the homes and market stalls seem warmer, softer, and more inviting. The peacefulness of the scene is broken only by the faint clinking of coins being exchanged, the rustle of cloth as merchants rearrange their goods, and the soft laughter of a few children who dart between the stalls. The slow pace of the morning carries with it a sense of harmony, as if everything in the village is perfectly aligned with the natural world around it. As the villagers settle into their tasks, there is no rush to be anywhere, no sense of hurry. Time is measured by the sun, and the rhythm of life here is as constant and steady as the seasons themselves. The sounds of the market, the voices of neighbors exchanging greetings, the soft thud of the hammer as the blacksmith shapes his tools, and the steady clink of pottery being made all blend together to create a melody of life, unhurried and full of quiet satisfaction. Above it all, the ancient oak tree at the edge of the square sways gently in the breeze, its branches whispering a song of timelessness. For the villagers, this is a place where simplicity reigns, where every gesture, every movement, every word has meaning, and where life unfolds in its own unhurried time. As the day stretches out ahead, there is no need to worry about what the future holds or the tasks yet to be done. The village exists in a state of pure presence, where the act of living is as fulfilling as the completion of any task. And as you settle into this world, Breathe in deeply, and let the gentle rhythm of life wash over you, carrying you further into the heart of the village, where each moment invites peace, and every step takes you closer to the comfort of a slow, steady existence, here, amidst the warmth of the sun and the quiet companionship of the villagers. You will find a rhythm of your own rhythm that invites you to rest, to relax, and to allow time to stretch and bend in ways that bring a deep sense of calm. The market square, bathed in the soft warmth of midday, hums with the gentle sounds of daily commerce as the village continues its slow dance of life. As the sun reaches its peak, the air feels heavier, thick with the scent of fresh bread, herbs, and the earthy aroma of fruits and vegetables that have just been gathered from the fields. The vendors, now fully settled into their daily rhythm, continue to arrange their goods with steady hands. A potter gently lifts a newly shaped vessel from his wheel, inspecting its smooth surface with practiced care before setting it aside to dry in the warm sun. Nearby, a weaver pulls thread through her loom, her hands moving in an elegant rhythm as she creates intricate patterns of fabric that will be worn by the villagers in the coming days. Children, now more awake and energized, weave in and out exits of the stalls, their laughter filling the air like a soft melody, adding a lightness to the otherwise serene atmosphere. Their feet make soft thuds against the cobblestones as they chase one another, dodging between baskets filled with ripe tomatoes, plump cucumbers, and bundles of herbs, while the adults smile fondly at their carefree joy. The older villagers, having completed their morning chores, sit on wooden benches beneath the shade of tall oak trees, their voices quiet as they share stories of seasons past, of harvests, and of the gentle rhythm of the village that has continued, for generations. The square, though bustling with activity, feels almost timeless in its simplicity, as if each day flows naturally into the next, unhurried and without interruption. The slow movements of the villagers, whether it's the careful arrangement of goods on a stall or the exchange of a few words between neighbors, create a soft, quiet rhythm that permeates the square and invites those who pass through to slow down and breathe in the peace of the moment. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the trees, carrying with it the faintest hints of dried lavender and wildflowers that grow on the outskirts of the square. Above, the sky is a deep, clear blue, unmarred by clouds, and the sunlight casts a golden hue over everything, giving the village a soft, glowing warmth that seems to slow time itself. Even as the day stretches on, the pace remains gentle. There are no rushes, no frantic calls for attention. The market continues in its quiet dance, with merchants trading their goods in exchange for coins, farmers offering their harvests with steady hands, and children exploring the square with the innocent curiosity of those who are free from the pressures of a fast-moving world. As the afternoon wears on, the sounds of the market become more soothing, the low murmur of voices, the occasional rustling of fabric, the clink of coins as transactions are made. Every action, every sound, every exchange feels as though it's part of a carefully orchestrated melody, played slowly and thoughtfully to ensure that no one is hurried, that no one is left behind. The sun, though high in the sky, begins to shift ever so slightly, casting longer shadows across the cobblestones, signaling that the day is moving forward, but still at its own pace. The simple beauty of the market is that it does not rush to meet the end of the day. It simply unfolds, step by step, with the steady patience of the earth itself. It is a place where the act of living is as important as the work itself, where each task, no matter how small, contributes to the greater harmony of the village. As the market continues to hum along, it is clear that this village, nestled beneath the watchful eye of the oak trees, exists in its own world, separate from the faster, more demanding rhythms of distant towns and cities, existing in its own time, slow and steady, like the natural world surrounding it. And as the afternoon sun continues to bathe the square in its golden light, the village's steady pulse carries on, inviting all who are willing to take part in its peaceful, unhurried way of life to slow down, breathe deeply, and find rest in the quiet dance of everyday moments. The sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, casting a soft amber glow across the village square, bathing everything in its golden light as the market continues to settle into the comfortable rhythm of the late afternoon. The day's energy has softened, and with it, the pace of life in the village slows to a peaceful, almost meditative tempo. The vendors, having sold their wares to the villagers who have come from nearby fields and homes, are now packing up their remaining goods. With unhurried movements, the potter wipes his hands on a cloth, satisfied with the day's work, and carefully wraps the remaining clay vessels for storage, while the weaver gathers her threads, her loom now idle, the fabric slowly taking form, as it always has, at its own deliberate pace. Children, their earlier burst of energy now subdued, sit on the stone steps of a nearby house, watching the last rays of the sun stretch long shadows across the cobblestones, their eyes half-lidded in the drowsy calm of a quiet afternoon. Hum of the market is now replaced by a softer soundscape, the rustling of fabric as it's folded, the gentle clink of coins being collected into pouches, the whisper of wind as it stirs the leaves of the trees surrounding the square, there, once warm and vibrant with the day's activities, now carries a cool freshness, the first hint of evening slipping quietly into the village. The farmers, their baskets emptied of produce, now converse in soft tones, sharing news of the land, of crops that have flourished or struggled in the fields, of the gentle rain that has nourished their work. Nearby, the blacksmith, having spent the day tending to his forge, now wipes the soot from his brow and begins the process of closing his workshop, his hammer resting against the anvil as he gazes out at the peaceful scene before him. The evening bell rings faintly in the distance, calling the village to rest, signaling that the day's work is done, and it is time to return to the quiet comfort of home. Even the sky seems to have slowed, with the clouds drifting lazily across the expanse. Above, their edges tinged with pink and lavender as the light of the setting sun fades into twilight. As the market's last patrons gather their belongings and begin their journey home, the sounds of the day become a distant memory, replaced by the soft chirping of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl perched on a distant branch. The village is slowly closing its doors to the outside world, drawing inward, where families will gather around hearths and share simple meals, their conversations low and intimate. As the steady rhythm of their lives continues, unbroken, like the flow of a quiet stream, the shopkeepers lock up their stalls, their goods safely tucked away for another day, while the children, led by their parents, begin their evening strolls, their footsteps echoing softly through the narrow village streets, now illuminated only by the dim light of lanterns swaying in the breeze. Square, once lively with the energy of trade and conversation, now rests in a deep stillness, the soft glow of the setting sun fading into the cool embrace of night. The distant hills, once bathed in light, are now darkening, and the stars begin to make their appearance, one by one, sparkling faintly against the velvet sky. The villagers, having completed their day's work, now take a moment to breathe in the cool night air, to reflect on the day's quiet blessings before retreating to their homes for rest. Here, time moves differently, slowly, deliberately, without the rush and clamor that often marks the world beyond the village's borders. Each action, each word, each moment is savored, held in quiet reverence, as the cycle of life continues its steady, unhurried course. The village, its rhythm unchanged, stands as a testament to the timeless flow of time where each day is measured not by clocks or calendars, but by the soft pulse of life, the steady beat of the earth beneath their feet, and the quiet flow of moments that shape their lives. As night fully embraces the village, the last remnants of sunlight slip away, leaving only the soft light of the moon to guide the way, and the village rests, secure in the rhythm of its quiet, enduring existence. In this place, there is no need for hurry, no need for urgency. Everything is as it should be, unfolding at its own pace, in harmony with the natural world. The market, having closed its doors for the evening, is now quiet, a space where memories of the day linger softly in the air, like the lingering scent of fresh bread or the faint warmth of the sun's final rays. The village, though small and simple, holds within it a rhythm that has been passed down through generations, a steady, quiet pulse that will continue long after the day's events have faded into memory. As the sun dips further beneath the horizon, casting the world in shades of deep orange and soft purple, the village begins to settle into the stillness of evening. The market square, now empty of bustling traders and customers, stands quiet and calm under the vast, fading sky. The once lively sounds of commerce have given way to the gentle rustle of leaves, stirred by a soft evening breeze that carries with it the scent of fresh grass and distant wildflowers. The warmth of the day lingers in the air, but it is tempered by the coolness of the approaching night. The villagers, having completed their daily tasks, now move with a sense of peace and quiet purpose as they head toward their homes. Their footsteps light on the worn cobblestones that have felt the weight of generations. Children, their energy spent from the day's play, are led home by their parents, their chatter soft and subdued as they pass through the village streets lined with homes that seem to exude warmth and comfort, their windows glowing softly with the flickering light of hearth fires. In the distance, the low hum of a distant stream becomes more pronounced, its steady flow a calming background to the quiet of the evening. The trees that line the edges of the village square stand tall and silent, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, casting long, delicate shadows across the ground. A single bird, its feathers glowing in the soft light of the setting sun, glides gracefully across the sky, its flight effortless and serene, a symbol of the peace that now envelops the village. A market stalls, now empty and tidied away, stand as quiet reminders of the day's activities, their weathered wood and colorful fabrics now at rest, awaiting the next morning when the rhythm of trade will begin anew. The villagers have come to embrace the slow, measured pace of life here, where time moves not with the hurried urgency of the outside world, but with the steady pulse of nature itself. In the homes scattered throughout the village, families are gathering together for the evening meal. The simple act of sharing food, of coming together as a family, is a ritual of connection, of community, of belonging. The warm, earthy scent of freshly baked bread mixes with the rich aroma of stews simmering on the hearth, creating a comforting fragrance that fills the air and draws the family closer. Laughter, soft and comforting, rises from the kitchens as stories of the day are shared, and children listen wide-eyed to tales of days gone by, their imaginations sparked by the words of their elders. The village itself seems to breathe a sigh of contentment as the day gives way to night. The light from the lanterns that line the paths between homes casts a gentle glow on the earth, their flickering flames dancing in time with the breeze, adding a soft warmth to the cool air. Above, the sky above, now a blanket of deep indigo, is scattered with stars that seem to twinkle with an ancient light, their presence a reminder of the timeless cycle of the world. The village is at peace, its rhythm uninterrupted, its heartbeat steady and constant. The sense of tranquility that settles over the landscape is palpable, as if the very earth itself is breathing deeply in the quiet of the evening. The elders, now seated under the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the village square, continue their quiet conversations, their voices low and steady, like the sound of a distant brook. They speak not of the events of the day, but of things deeper, of memories passed down through generations, of wisdom gained through time. The flickering light from their lanterns casts long shadows, illuminating the weathered lines of their faces, which speak of lives lived in harmony with the earth. Their words, though soft and slow, carry the weight of experience, and the younger villagers, gathered nearby, listen with rapt attention, absorbing the knowledge that only time can offer. As the evening progresses, the village grows quieter still. The distant sound of a bell, rung by the village elder to mark the passage of time, echoes softly across the land, a gentle reminder that life here is measured not in the rush of minutes, or hours, but in the slow, steady rhythm of the seasons. The night, now fully settled in, is a time for rest, for reflection, and for renewal. The village, bathed in the soft glow of the moon, rests in the embrace of the earth, its heartbeat steady, its breath slow and deep. The stars above shine brighter now, as if in response to the village's peaceful slumber. Their light a silent promise of another day to come. In the stillness of the night, as the moon rises higher in the sky, the village seems to exist outside of time, a place where the past, present, and future are woven together in the quiet flow of life. The animals, too, have settled for the night. The soft rustle of the leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, the only sounds that break the silence. The villagers, though scattered across the land, are united in their shared experience of this slow, steady existence, a way of life that is as much a part of them as the soil beneath their feet and the sky above their heads. The night, like the day, moves in its own time, with its own rhythm, and the villagers, in their quiet wisdom, have come to understand that this slow, measured pace is not to be rushed. It is a way of life that has endured through centuries, a steady pulse that carries them forward into the unknown, secure in the knowledge that, as long as the earth turns and the stars shine, this rhythm will continue. And so, as the night deepens and the village falls into a peaceful slumber, it does so with the comfort of knowing that time, in its quiet flow, will always return to them, bringing with it the promise of another day, another chance to continue, living in harmony with the earth, with each other, and with the world around them. As the first light of dawn begins to pierce the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold, the village slowly stirs from its peaceful slumber. The early morning air is cool and crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of grass and the promise of a new day. The distant crow of a rooster breaks the silence, its sharp call a signal that the quiet night has come to an end and the day is beginning. In the village, the inhabitants begin to emerge from their homes, stretching and yawning as they adjust to the morning light. The market square, still empty, begins to take on a life of its own. The quiet hum of the morning gradually building as the day's rhythm starts to form. The familiar sound of wooden carts creaking on the cobblestones fills the air as farmers and merchants begin to set up their stalls, their hands moving with practiced ease as they arrange their wares with deliberate care. The sun, still low on the horizon, casts long, soft shadows that stretch across the square, the golden light bathing everything it touches in a warm, gentle glow. The villagers move with a sense of calm purpose, their movements unhurried, as if they are in tune with the natural rhythm of the world around them. There is no rush here, no frantic hurry to get things done. Everything is done in its own time, at its own pace, and the village, with its peaceful atmosphere, seems to breathe in harmony with the earth itself. As the morning progresses, the village comes alive with the soft murmur of voices, the clink of coins, and the gentle rustle of fabric as the merchants offer their goods to the villagers. The air is filled with the scent of freshly baked bread, the earthy aroma of herbs and vegetables, and the faint scent of wood smoke from the hearths of nearby homes. The potter, his hands covered in clay, carefully shapes each piece on the spinning wheel, his focus steady as he creates vessels that will be used in the daily life of the village. The weaver's hands move rhythmically, the shuttle passing back and forth through the loom as she creates fabric that will be used to make clothing, blankets, and other necessities. The blacksmith's hammer strikes the anvil with a steady beat, his strong hands shaping metal into tools and implements that will be used in the everyday tasks of the village. Children, their faces bright with curiosity, wander between the stalls. Their laughter soft and light, like the tinkling of small bells. They pause to examine the goods on display, their wide eyes taking in the colors and textures of the world around them. The elders, seated beneath the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the square, watch the bustling scene with quiet approval. Their conversations are soft, their voices low and steady, as they pass on stories of the past and share wisdom that has been gathered over a lifetime. They are the silent witnesses to the rhythms of the village, the quiet watchers who observe, without interruption, content to see the world unfold before them in its slow, steady way. The market, with its quiet bustle, is a reflection of the village itself, a place where time moves slowly, where every action has its place and purpose, and where the simple act of living is done with care and intention. As the morning passes, the sun rises higher, its light growing stronger and warmer as it climbs into the sky. The shadows shorten, and the air becomes warmer, though still cool enough to be comfortable. The villagers continue their work, each task flowing seamlessly into the next, their movements smooth and unhurried, as if time itself is not something to be conquered, but something to be savored. The simple act of preparing for the day, of setting up the market and tending to the needs of the village, becomes a meditation in presence, a reminder that life is not meant to be rushed, but to be lived fully in each moment. As the day moves toward midday, the market square becomes a hub of activity, the steady hum of voices and the soft clink of coins exchanged for goods filling the air. The farmers and merchants, having set up their stalls, begin to greet the villagers who come to purchase the goods they offer. The exchange of goods is done with a sense of respect and understanding, each trade a small act of connection, a moment of shared experience between neighbors. The air is filled with the sounds of life, the low hum of conversation, the occasional shout of greeting, the soft rustle of fabric, and the quiet clatter of tools being tested and adjusted. The village is in its prime now, the pulse of the day, strong and steady. But even in the midst of this activity there is a sense of calm, a stillness that pervades everything. There is no rush here, no hurry to get things done. Everything is done at its own pace, and the village moves in harmony with the natural world around it. The sun, now high in the sky, bathes the square in bright, warm light. The shadows of the buildings and trees stretching long and deep across the cobblestones. The world seems to stand still for a moment, as if holding its breath, allowing the village to exist in its own peaceful rhythm, unaffected by the rush of the outside world. As the afternoon stretches on, the pace of life slows once more, the activity in the square becoming less frenetic as the sun begins to dip lower in the sky. The farmers and merchants begin to pack up their goods, the market winding down as the day nears its end, the villagers, having completed their tasks for the day, begin to retreat to their homes, their footsteps lighter now, as the warmth of the day fades into the coolness of the evening. The market square, once bustling with activity, now stands empty, the stalls folded up and quiet, waiting for another day to begin. The sun, now sinking below the horizon, casts the village in a soft, golden light. The sky painted in shades of pink, purple, and orange as the day comes to a close. The world is still once more, the village at peace, the steady rhythm of life continuing as it always has. As the darkness of night begins to fall, the village settles into a deep, quiet sleep. The stars shining brightly overhead, their light a reminder of the timeless cycle of the world, a cycle that will continue long after the day's work is done, and the village remains a quiet, steadfast witness to the passing of time. As the sun begins its descent behind the hills, casting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and gold, the village enters a peaceful quietude, settling into the soft embrace of evening. The warmth of the day starts to give way to the coolness of twilight, and the shadows grow longer across the fields and streets, stretching lazily across the earth. The market square, which had once been alive with the sound of bargaining and the steady hum of everyday life, now stands still, its wooden stalls empty, the goods neatly packed away in anticipation of another day. The quiet rustling of the trees in the gentle evening breeze is the only sound that fills the air. As the last few villagers finish their daily tasks, retreating to their homes, the evening sky, now deepening into shades of indigo and purple, casts a serene glow over the village as the first stars begin to twinkle in the sky, heralding the arrival of night. The scent of earth and freshly cut grass lingers in the cool air, mixing with the faint aroma of supper cooking in the hearths of the village homes. The village is settling in for the night, and all around there is a sense of calm, a feeling that everything is as it should be. In the distance, the faint sound of a bell tolls from the village's ancient church tower, marking the hour as the night deepens. As the bell fades, the peaceful stillness that follows seems to hold the entire village in a gentle embrace. Those who work the land, the farmers and the shepherds, take a moment to rest before the final light of the day fades completely. Children, their laughter fading as the light dims, are ushered inside by their parents, their footsteps light and quiet as they leave the streets and head toward the warmth of home. The evening is a time for families to come together, to share a meal, to tell stories, and to rest after the day's labor. In the village square, the last of the market vendors pack away their goods, preparing to return to their homes, their movements slow and deliberate, as though reluctant to let the day end. The simple, rhythmic act of closing up the stalls is a ritual in itself, a reminder of the unhurried pace that governs life in this place. A lone figure stands at the edge of the square, watching the sky as the sun's final rays slip away. The figure, cloaked in dark garments, surveys the quiet, landscape, the village at peace beneath the blanket of twilight. The silence is almost tangible, thick in the air, as the figure remains still, observing the village in its final moments of light before the night takes hold completely. The distant howls of wolves can be heard from the woods, their eerie calls, a reminder of the wildness that exists just beyond the village's borders. Though the wolves' presence is distant, it is a sound that is always present in the back of the villagers' minds, a reminder of the untamed world that lies outside their carefully cultivated lives. The village, nestled in the valley, is safe and protected, but it is always aware of the presence of the wild, a presence that is felt even in the deepest stillness of the night. As the light fades completely, the figure turns and walks into the shadows, disappearing into the village's darkened streets. The night has truly arrived, and the village, though still, is never completely quiet. The low murmur of conversation can be heard from inside the homes as families gather around their hearths, sharing stories, laughter, and food. The air is filled with the sounds of the evening's rituals, dishes clinking, voices murmuring, and the crackle of firewood burning, dim in hearths. The firelight flickers in the windows, casting long shadows across the walls as the night deepens and the village settles into its nighttime routine. Even the animals, which had spent the day grazing in the fields, are now tucked away in their barns or stables, their soft breathing the only sound of life in the otherwise quiet village. The village watchman, a solitary figure standing atop a hill overlooking the village, watches the houses below with a vigilant gaze, ensuring that the night remains undisturbed. His role is simple, but important, a silent guardian, standing ditch alone in the dark to watch over the peace of the village. The watchman's gaze sweeps over the rooftops, scanning for any sign of movement, any disturbance in the stillness. His eyes are sharp, his mind focused, as he stands alone under the vast, starry sky, a quiet sentinel in the cool night air. As the stars fill the sky, the watchman's thoughts turn inward, pondering the peaceful existence of the village and the simple, unhurried rhythm of life that defines this place. The watchman knows that his vigil, though solitary, is part of a larger, timeless tradition, a tradition that has been passed down through generations of watchmen, guardians of the village who stood silently in the night, ensuring the safety of their people. The village, though small and peaceful, has always relied on the vigilance of its guardians, and the watchman's presence is an essential part of the village's identity. There, the watchman shifts his gaze, his eyes scanning the horizon, where the darkened landscape stretches out before him, silent and still. The world beyond the village is a different place, a place filled with danger and uncertainty, where wild animals roam and the unknown lurks in the shadows. But here, in the village, there is only peace, a peace that is carefully maintained by the watchman and his fellow guardians. As the night deepens, the watchman's thoughts become softer, his vigilance steady but serene. He knows that the night will pass without incident, and when the first light of dawn breaks over the hills, the village will once again wake to the familiar rhythm of another day. But for now, as the stars shimmer above and the village sleeps below, the watchman remains, a silent guardian in the cool, dark night, ensuring that all is well and that the village continues its peaceful existence, undisturbed by the wildness of the world outside. Seed. The village lay bathed in the quiet, cool embrace of the night, a serenity punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the stream that wound its way through the valley. As the night deepened, the few remaining villagers wrapped themselves in the familiar comfort of their homes, their voices growing softer as they drifted into slumber. The watchman, whose post atop the hill offered him an unbroken view of the village and its surroundings, stood vigilant, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the village, where the wild forests and rocky cliffs gave way to the unknown. He had seen this quiet scene many times before, but tonight, as the moon hung low in the sky, there was something different in the unspoken tension that seemed to linger just beyond the edge of his vision. He couldn't place it, but the stillness of the night felt heavier, thicker, as if the very earth itself held its breath in anticipation of something yet to come. The wind shifted slightly, carrying with it the faint scent of damp soil and pine, but also something else, something wild, untamed. The watchman's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword, his senses alert as his eyes narrowed, trying to pierce the darkness that surrounded him. It wasn't just the usual night sounds that had caught his attention. There was something more, a faint, rhythmic crunching of leaves and twigs, soft but deliberate, moving toward the village. His heart rate quickened as his instincts flared. Someone, or something, was out there in the woods. The watchman's mind raced. He had been stationed here for years, guarding the village from wild beasts and the occasional intruder. But this felt different. The movements were too calculated, too deliberate. It wasn't an animal. No, it was something else, something human. His thoughts raced as he turned on his heels, his eyes scanning the surrounding hillside, trying to catch sight of the figure that moved silently through the underbrush. For a moment, the night seemed to hold its breath with him, and then he saw it just at the edge of the tree line, a dark figure, barely visible in the shadows. The watchman's hand gripped the hilt of his sword tighter as his mind quickly assessed the situation. It was too dark to see clearly, but the figure was tall, cloaked, and moving with purpose. Its steps steady and unhurried, almost as if it knew the land well. The watchman's heart pounded in his chest, and a surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins. He knew that he had to act quickly to keep the village safe. He moved toward the figure, his steps careful and deliberate, trying to remain silent as he made his way through the brush. The moonlight flickered through the trees, casting fleeting shadows that seemed to dance and shift with every step he took. As he drew closer to the figure, he could make out more details. Its cloak was dark, blending seamlessly with the night, and it seemed to be carrying something, a bundle of some sort. The figure moved with practiced ease, as though it were accustomed to traveling in the dark. The watchman's mind raced. What was this person doing in the woods at this hour? Was it a thief, a wanderer lost in the night, or something more sinister? The closer he got, the more his doubts grew. This was no ordinary villager. The watchman moved in closer, his sword drawn and ready, but as he took his next step, the figure seemed to sense his presence. In one swift, fluid motion, the figure turned, its eyes glinting in the dim moonlight. The watchman froze, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, the two of them stood there, locked in a tense silence, the only sound the rustling of the leaves in the breeze. The figure didn't speak, didn't make a sound, but the watchman could feel a chill creeping up his spine as he stared into the stranger's eyes. There was something unnerving about the gaze, cold, distant, and yet somehow knowing. The watchman's hand tightened on his sword as he prepared to speak, to demand an explanation for the figure's presence. But before he could utter a word, the figure spoke first. "You are the watchman," it said, its voice soft but clear, cutting through the silence like a blade. "I have been watching you." The words struck the watchman like a blow, and for a moment he hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady but low. The figure remained silent for a moment, its gaze never leaving his den. With a slow, deliberate movement, the figure reached up and lowered its hood, revealing a face that was both familiar and foreign. The watchman's eyes widened as recognition flickered in his mind, but before he could react, the figure spoke again. "I am here to warn you," it said, its tone calm but urgent. "Something is coming, something you will not be able to stop." The watchman's mind raced. What was this figure talking about? What danger could possibly threaten the village? He had been stationed here for years, and nothing had ever happened. Not even the wolves dared to venture this close to the settlement. But the figure's words had struck a nerve, and for the first time in his life, the watchman felt an overwhelming sense of unease. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low and steady despite the growing tension in his chest. The figure's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile, but it was a smile that held no warmth. "You'll see soon enough," it said cryptically, before turning and disappearing into the trees as quickly as it had appeared. The watchman stood frozen for a long moment, his heart still pounding in his chest. He glanced around, but the figure was gone, leaving only the rustling leaves and the distant howls of wolves as a reminder of the encounter. The watchman's mind was spinning with questions. But there was one thing he knew for certain: the figure's warning had not been a simple threat. Something was coming, something dark and dangerous. And the watchman couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer watching over the village alone. The figure's eyes haunted him as he stood there in the dark, wondering what the future held for the peaceful village and the people who called it home. But for now, there was nothing more he could do. The village slept, unaware of the danger that lurked just beyond the horizon, and the watchman was left alone in the dark, a silent sentinel watching over a world on the brink of change. The quiet tranquility of the village seemed to hang in the balance, its peaceful rhythms now interrupted by an unsettling presence that lingered in the air. The watchman, still reeling from the cryptic words of the mysterious figure, stood on his post, his gaze locked on the darkness that spread beyond the village, where the forest met the horizon in a jagged line of shadow. The moon had long since sunk behind a cloud, casting the world into a deeper blackness, as if the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. For days he could not shake the feeling that something was coming, something darker and more dangerous than anything the village had ever known. His heart still raced as he thought about the figure's warning. Something is coming. Something you will not be able to stop. The words echoed in his mind like a constant drumbeat, each repetition growing louder, more insistent. He had spent years at his post, guarding the village from wolves and wild creatures, but this was different. The warning spoke of something far more sinister, something not of this world. His hand tightened on the hilt of his sword as the wind picked up, rustling through the branches of the trees surrounding the village, whispering of the unknown. The air smelled faintly of earth and rain. But there was something else, something metallic, as if the very soil itself was brewing with something dark. His thoughts were interrupted by a sound from the woods, a rustling of leaves that was too deliberate to be the work of the wind. He stiffened, his muscles tense as his eyes darted toward the tree line. For a moment all was still, the only sound the distant murmur of the stream and the occasional rustling of the branches. Then he heard it again: footsteps, slow but deliberate, moving closer. The watchman's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped back, crouching low behind a cluster of rocks, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The footsteps were unmistakable now, growing louder with each passing second. Whoever it was, they were close to close. He could see the faintest shadow moving among the trees, and as the figure emerged into the pale light, his breath caught in his throat. It was another cloaked figure, like the one who had appeared to him days ago, but this one was different. There was something about the way it moved, its steps measured and precise, its posture unnervingly straight and controlled. The watchman felt a chill run down his spine as the figure drew nearer, its face obscured by the deep shadows of its hood. He knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't let this one escape without an explanation. "Stop right there," he shouted, his voice firm but filled with urgency. The figure did not flinch, did not hesitate. It simply stopped, standing still in the middle of the path, as if waiting for something. The watchman gripped his sword tighter, his heart racing. He stepped forward slowly, keeping his eyes trained on the figure, his every muscle alert to any sudden movement. The figure finally spoke, its voice eerily calm and steady. "I told you, didn't I?" it said, its tone devoid of emotion. "The village is in danger." The watchman's blood ran cold as the words hit him like a wave. How could this figure know? How could it have known what had happened before? "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to keep it steady. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it lowered its hood, revealing a face that was both familiar and strange, with sharp, angular features and eyes that gleamed in the dim light. The watchman's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the figure. It was the same person who had warned him days ago. "I'm here to help," the figure said, its voice now softer, almost pleading, but it's too late to stop it. The darkness has already started to spread. The watchman's mind raced as the figure's words settled in his thoughts. He had been warned, but he had not acted quickly enough. Now it was too late. The danger had arrived, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. His eyes darted to the village, where the soft glow of candlelight could still be seen through the windows. The peaceful scene now seemed fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. "What do you want from me?" the watchman asked, his voice low and filled with dread. The figure stepped closer, its eyes never leaving his. "I want you to listen. I want you to understand what's coming, so you can prepare. There's no time to waste." The watchman felt a knot form in his stomach as the figure spoke, its words heavy with an urgency that he could no longer ignore. "Tell me, what's happening?" he demanded, his voice firm now, his sense of duty overriding his fear. The figure paused, then sighed, its shoulders slumping as if burdened by an unseen weight. "The darkness that's coming. It's not just some creature of the night. It's something ancient, something that has been waiting for centuries. And now it's here." The watchman's mind spun as the figure's words began to sink in. An ancient darkness. What could that possibly mean? "Why now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why has it come now?" The figure hesitated, its eyes flickering with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. "It's been building for a long time. The land has been changing. The signs have been there all along, but no one has been paying attention. You've been guarding the village, but you haven't seen what's been happening around you. The darkness was always there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike, and now that moment has arrived." The watchman's heart pounded as the weight of the figure's words settled upon him. He had spent so many years watching over the village, guarding it from the wolves and the wilds. But now he realized he had missed something far more dangerous, something he couldn't protect them from. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice shaking. "What can we do to stop it?" The figure's eyes darkened as it shook its head. "You can't stop it. No one can. But you can try to prepare, try to protect the ones you love. It won't be easy. The darkness will consume everything in its path. But if you're ready, you might have a chance to survive." The watchman's mind reeled. How could they survive against something like that? He had to protect the village, but how could he fight something so dark, so powerful? The figure stepped back, its cloak billowing slightly in the breeze. "I'll help you, but you have to be ready. The night is only the beginning." And with that, the figure turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the watchman standing alone on his post, the weight of the warning heavy in his chest. The village slept, unaware of the impending danger that loomed just beyond the horizon, and the watchman knew that his world would never be the same. As the village continued its steady pulse, like a heart beating in perfect sync with the rhythm of nature, the slow passage of time seemed almost imperceptible to the inhabitants. Life in the market square, with its gently unfolding moments, remained a serene reflection of the cycles of the day, marked not by the hands of a clock, but by the sun's tender journey across the sky. The merchants, their hands worn from the steady work of their crafts, went about their business with deliberate grace, folding cloth, arranging fruits, and offering their wares with quiet patience. The soft sound of their voices, filled with the hum of daily exchange, melded with the rhythmic clink of coins and the occasional rustle of fabric as it was smoothed out or folded carefully. In the early morning light, dew still clung to the leaves of nearby trees, casting a fresh, delicate glow over the marketplace, while the breeze, cool and gentle, whispered through the marketplace, rustling the edges of the wooden stalls. The weaver's loom creaked softly as it turned, the weaver's fingers working with practiced precision, threading the fabric that would soon become garments to be worn by villagers far and wide. Each thread pulled through the loom carried with it the weight of tradition, the fabric woven with the stories of generations past, each new piece of cloth an extension of those who had come before. As the day progressed, the sun climbed higher, casting its warm golden light over the market, and the sounds of the village swelled gently. As the chatter of families and neighbors carried over the square, their voices filled with the hum of community life. The potter's wheel, still spinning, shaped the wet clay into forms both beautiful and functional. Vessels that would hold the food and water essential to the village's survival, each one a small piece of the larger story of life in this quiet corner of the world. The potter's hands, calloused and sure, worked with an unhurried grace, shaping the clay with the care of someone who knew the land's rhythms intimately, who understood that the task of creating something that would endure was never to be rushed. Nearby, the blacksmith's forge hissed with heat, the rhythmic pounding of his hammer upon the iron reverberating through the square like a heartbeat, each strike a testament to the craftsmanship that defined life in the village. Children, their faces flushed with the excitement of a world still fresh and new to them, ran barefoot through the market, their laughter spilling into the air like music, while elders, their bodies bent with the years, sat quietly in the shade, coquette of the great oak, their conversations soft and thoughtful. The light, now softer as afternoon drew near, seemed to settle over the square like a blanket, enveloping all in its warmth. The stalls, laden with the bounty of the land, stood as silent sentinels of the day's work, their wooden frames and fabric coverings gently swaying in the breeze. The air, filled with the mingling scents of freshly baked bread, earthy vegetables, and the soft perfume of wildflowers, created a sensory landscape that calmed the mind and soothed the spirit. The rhythm of the day continued its unhurried march, the passing hours marked only by the sun's movement across the sky and the steady, measured actions of those in the square. It was in this pace, slow and steady, that life's true meaning seemed to emerge, a reminder that in the simplest acts of daily existence one could find purpose, connection, and beauty. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long, soft shadows across the ground, the village seemed to sigh in contentment, the day's work drawing to a close with the same quiet grace that had defined its beginning. The market, now quieter, was filled with the last exchanges of the day, the final transactions taking place as the light faded, the warm glow of the sunset enveloping everything in its path. The villagers, having completed their tasks, gathered their belongings and began to make their way home, their steps slow but purposeful. The night was not far off, and with it came the promise of rest, a time to reflect upon the day's labors, and to prepare for the dawn of a new one. The village, nestled in the embrace of the land, seemed to breathe in time with the natural world, its heart beating steadily as it had for generations, a rhythm as timeless as the earth itself. The story of this place, woven together by the threads of each individual's daily existence, continued to unfold quietly, its pages turning slowly, each moment a continuation of the one before it, a gentle reminder that time, though imperceptible, moves forward, carrying with it the weight of all that has come before and all that is yet to be. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the rhythm of life in the village remained steadfast, an enduring pulse of unhurried movement. Each morning, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the market square would come, alive with the sound of rustling cloth and the soft murmur of voices. The daily rituals of setting up shop and arranging wares following the same pattern they had for generations. Farmers would bring their harvest to trade, the bright colors of fresh vegetables and fruits mingling with the earthy tones of the baskets they were carried in. The weaver's loom would begin its gentle hum as the cloth was woven, thread by thread, into patterns that would soon cover the backs of villagers, a fabric stitched with both care and purpose. The potter's wheel would turn steadily, the wet clay shaped into something useful, something necessary. Yet, beneath the surface of this peaceful, predictable routine, something darker began to stir, a feeling that lingered in the corners of the village like a shadow that refused to dissipate with the setting sun. The elders, who had lived through the changing seasons of countless years, spoke less frequently of the past. But there were times when they gathered beneath the great oak tree in the square, their hushed voices betraying a weight of unspoken history. They had seen more than the younger generation, remembered more, and it was in their quiet moments that the stories of old began to resurface. The stories that were meant to remain buried, hidden beneath the gentle flow of life that defined the present. It was said, in whispers, that the land itself held secrets buried deep within its soil, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The once vibrant, thriving forest that lay just beyond the village, now growing wild and untamed, had once been a place of mystery and legend, a place where the line between the known and the unknown had always seemed blurred. The older generations remembered the tales of the great trees that had once stood tall, their roots intertwined with the earth, their branches reaching out like arms, guarding the village from unseen forces. But with time, the forest had slowly faded, its trees felled by the axes of men, its secrets forgotten as the village grew and expanded, spreading beyond the boundaries it had once known. Now, only the shadows of those trees remained, twisted and gnarled, casting long, eerie silhouettes, against the pale moonlight that bathed the land at night. The villagers, though unaware of the full extent of the forest's secrets, could feel its presence in the air, a quiet, ever-watchful force that seemed to watch over them as they went about their daily lives. The younger generation, raised on tales of the forest's fading glory, had grown up with a deep-seated curiosity about the land, its mysteries, and what lay hidden within the darkened corners of the world beyond. But there was an unspoken rule, a sort of pact between the generations, that the forest was best left undisturbed, its shadows remaining unchallenged by the light of the village. It was, on a particular evening, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, that the peace of the village was broken, not by the sound of axes or the creak of carts, but by the soft rustling of leaves in the forest. It was a sound that had not been heard in many years, a sound that carried with it a sense of foreboding, as if the land itself was waking up, stretching its limbs and remembering its ancient power. The elders, sensing the shift in the air, gathered once again beneath the oak tree, their faces etched with concern, their eyes darting toward the edge of the forest. They had always known that the past, though buried, had a way of resurfacing when least expected, but even they could not have foreseen the events that would follow, the events that would uncover the forgotten truths hidden in the soil, and stir up the ancient forces that had once shaped the village. The villagers, for their part, went about their business as usual, unaware of the stirring that was taking place just beyond their sight. But as the days passed and the sounds from the forest grew louder, more insistent, a sense of unease began to take root within the hearts of those who lived in the village. The once peaceful, steady rhythm of life now seemed fragile, as if the very foundation of their existence was being threatened by something they could neither see nor understand. The market square, once filled with the sounds of barter and trade, now felt silent, as if the land itself had absorbed the usual hum of activity and replaced it with a heavy stillness that weighed on the air. It was in the silence of that evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded and the stars began to twinkle faintly in the sky, that the first of the strange occurrences took place. It began with the sound of footsteps, faint at first, but growing steadily louder, echoing through the village as if a procession was making its way toward the square. The villagers, sensing the disturbance, stepped out into the open, their faces filled with confusion and curiosity. But when they looked toward the forest, they saw nothing. No figures, no movement, only the quiet rustling of the leaves in the trees. Yet the sound continued, persistent and eerie, as if something unseen was drawing closer. The elders, now deeply concerned, began to gather their own families and make preparations for the unknown. They knew that something ancient was stirring, something that had been dormant for centuries, and that the peaceful life they had built was now threatened by forces far beyond their understanding. As the night stretched on, the village remained on edge, every rustle of leaves and creak of the trees causing hearts to race. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The forest once again falling into silence, leaving behind only the lingering sense that something was amiss. The villagers, uncertain of what to make of the events, returned to their homes, the uneasy feeling of the night clinging to them. They could not shake the sense that the land was shifting, that the world they had known so well was changing in deft ways they could neither control nor predict. And so, as the days passed and the village returned to its usual routine, the forest remained at the edge of their consciousness, its secrets stirring in the shadows, waiting for the moment when they would be forced to confront the past and the truths it held, once and for all. The village remained still, like a breath held in anticipation, as if the land itself had momentarily paused its rhythm. Days passed with the same quiet routine, but there was an undeniable shift in the air, a thickening of the atmosphere that the villagers could not ignore. The market square, though still bustling with activity, had an undertone of unease that no one could quite place. The whispers of the elders had spread like wildfire, their words carrying a weight that seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. As the days slipped into evenings, the once comfortable space of the square began to feel too open, too exposed. The shadows cast by the evening light grew longer, stretching across the cobblestones in strange patterns, as if the earth itself was reluctant to be touched by the fading sun. The children, once playful and carefree, had taken to playing close to home, their laughter tinged with an unfamiliar apprehension. The elders no longer gathered beneath the oak tree at dusk, their silence echoing louder than any words could. And the village itself, though outwardly peaceful, felt as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. It was as though the forest had reached out with invisible tendrils, wrapping the village in a web of unspoken tension, pulling it toward an inevitable confrontation. No one dared to venture far into the woods, not even the bravest among them. The stories of the past, of the ancient guardians and the old magic that once thrived in the heart of the forest, had resurfaced in hushed tones, whispered between those who remembered the older times. These were not stories of comfort or reassurance, but of old powers that had been forgotten by the village, powers that now seemed to awaken in the shadows of the trees. It was on a particularly moonless night that the village's unease reached its peak. The wind had died, and the usual rustling of the leaves in the trees had ceased. In its place was a silence so thick it felt suffocating, pressing down on the village as if the air itself had turned cold with expectation. In the distance, barely audible, came the faintest sound of something shifting in the woods. It was not the usual creak of branches or the rustling of small animals. This was different, deliberate, purposeful. It seemed to come from deep within the forest, from a place where even the bravest villagers dared not tread. The sound was distant, but it carried with it a sense of urgency, a pull that seemed to draw at something primal within the very earth. The villagers, sensing that something had finally broken through the stillness, gathered together in groups, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that whatever had been lying in wait was now stirring. The elders were the first to speak, their faces etched with years of wisdom and fear. They spoke in low tones, their words heavy with meaning. They spoke of the old guardians, the spirits of the forest that had protected the village long ago, but they also spoke of the price of their protection, of the pact that had been made between the land and the people. It was a pact that had been forgotten, but one that had never truly been broken. Now, the forest, disturbed by the encroaching civilization, seemed to be calling out, reaching for the people it had once protected, and demanding that the balance be restored. The villagers had not been aware of the consequences of their growth, their expansion beyond the original borders of the settlement. They had taken from the forest without understanding the cost, and now the forest was demanding repayment. The trees, the earth, the very wind seemed to whisper of this debt, a debt that had gone unnoticed for far too long. As the night grew darker, the sound from the forest grew louder, more distinct, until it became an unmistakable presence that hung over the village like a storm cloud. It was not a noise of danger, but of something ancient and powerful stirring from its long slumber. The villagers knew they could no longer ignore the call, for it was now impossible to pretend that the past could remain buried beneath the weight of the present. Something was coming, something that would either restore the balance or destroy everything they had built. The elders began to gather those who were willing, those who still remembered the old ways and the rituals that had once kept the balance between the forest and the village. It was not a gathering of force, but of knowledge and tradition. The time had come to confront the shadows that had grown so long, to face the forces that had once been forgotten but had never truly left. The villagers, though uncertain and afraid, knew deep down that they could not remain ignorant of the past. The forest, with its ancient wisdom, would either accept them back into its fold, or it would demand its due. As the moon rose in the sky, casting its pale light over the village, the ground beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with the pulse of the earth itself. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and the promise of change. It was in this moment, under the cover of night, that the villagers understood that they were not simply dealing with a forest, but with a living, breathing entity that had its own desires, its own ancient needs. And they, too, were a part of it, whether they realized it or not. So the silence that had once been so oppressive now felt like the calm before the storm, a storm that was not of wind or rain, but of something deeper, something older. The village had unknowingly crossed a threshold, and the forest, with its ancient guardians and forgotten magic, was now coming to claim what was rightfully its own. The people would either stand together to face the unknown, or they would be swept away by the forces they had long ignored. And so, with the darkness enveloping the villagers stood on the edge of something much larger than themselves, a moment that would define not just their survival, but the fate of the land itself. They could feel the pull of the forest, a gentle but insistent tug at their hearts, urging them forward into the unknown. Whether they were ready or not, they were about to face the forces of the past. The village could never go back to the way it was, and the old pact, long forgotten, would either be renewed or forever broken. the morning after the unsettling night passed with an eerie quiet that hung thick over the village like a fog. The usual chirping of birds was conspicuously absent, and the wind, which normally rustled through the trees, was still as though the earth itself had held its breath. Even the familiar sounds of the market, with vendors calling out their goods and the shuffle of feet on cobblestones, seemed muffled, as though the village was submerged in a fog of hesitation. The villagers gathered in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones, sharing the lingering unease of the previous night's events, but no one spoke openly about the forest's call. They could feel it pressing against the edges of their consciousness, a weight that could not be ignored. The elders had been awake long before the sun rose, gathered in the old meeting hall at the center of the village. They knew that something had changed. Something ancient had stirred in the woods. They also knew that the longer they hesitated, the worse the consequences would be. It was the time of reckoning. The village had grown too large, too dependent on the land that had once been carefully protected. The ever-expanding borders of the settlement, though they had brought prosperity, had begun to encroach upon forces that no one had thought to question. The stories of the old days, when the village was smaller, when the forest still held its ancient power, came flooding back to the elders. Tales told in whispers at the firelight, passed down from generation to generation. The power of the forest, guardians that protected it, had been in place for as long as anyone could remember. But over time, as the village grew, as they used more of the land, the balance had shifted, subtly at first, but with increasing force over the years. The villagers had long since forgotten the old rituals, the sacrifices made to keep the forest's power at bay, and now they would pay the price for that forgetfulness. The night had been a warning, a call from the depths of the forest, a signal, that the time had come to address the forgotten pact. The elders knew that the forest, with its ancient power, would not relent until the balance was restored. They gathered around a large wooden table in the hall, poring over old maps of the village and the surrounding forest, drawing lines where the boundaries once were. They remembered when the village had been smaller, more humble, and the forest had been kept at a respectful distance. But over time, as the village expanded, they had slowly pushed the boundary out, taking more and more from the forest, building homes and fields where the trees had once stood. The forests were no longer just a backdrop to the village's existence. They had become a distant memory, their importance lost in the bustle of daily life. But the call of the forest was now impossible to ignore. The villagers had unknowingly reached the tipping point, the moment when their growth had outstripped the forest's tolerance, and now it was demanding a reckoning. The forest's call was not just a warning, but a summons, a beckoning that could no longer be avoided. The elders knew they had to act, and act swiftly. They gathered the bravest of the villagers, those who still remembered the old ways, those who had heard the legends passed down through generations. These were the ones who had felt the stirring of the forest's power in their bones, the ones who still had an innate understanding of the balance between the land and its people. It was they who would enter the forest and seek out the guardians, the ancient protectors who watched over the trees and the earth. They would be the ones to face the consequences of the village's expansion, to confront the forces that had been disturbed and return the balance to the land. The path into the forest was not an easy one. The land that lay beyond the edge of the village was thick with trees, the branches intertwined in a dense canopy that blocked out much of the light. The ground was uneven and rough, the earth clinging to the roots of ancient trees that had stood for centuries. The deeper they ventured into the forest, the more oppressive the air became. It was as though the trees themselves were closing in around them, their branches reaching out like dark fingers, drawing them further into the depths of the woods. But the villagers, guided by the elders and their understanding of the old rituals, pressed forward. They knew they were not just walking into the forest, but into the heart of something much larger, something older than any of them could comprehend. As they moved deeper into the woods, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy with the scent of moss and earth, the sounds of the village's distant chatter fading into silence. Every step felt like a step further away from the safety of the known world and closer to something unknown, something ancient. The forest felt alive, breathing around them, its presence pressing in from all sides. It was then that they saw it, a clearing in the woods, a place where the trees opened up, into a vast expanse of earth and sky. In the center of the clearing stood a stone altar, weathered and ancient, its surface covered in moss and lichen. It was a place that had not been touched by human hands for generations, a place that had remained hidden from the world. The villagers gathered around the altar, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that this was the site of the old rituals, the place where the sacrifices had once been made to keep the forest's guardians at bay. It was here that they would make their offering, hoping that it would be enough to restore the balance. But as they stood there, a figure emerged from the shadows of the trees. It was tall and cloaked, its features hidden beneath the hood of its robe. The figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful, like a being of the forest itself. The villagers froze, their breath catching in their throats. They had not expected to meet the guardian so soon, but here, in the heart, care of the forest, it was standing before them. The guardian's voice was soft, but its words carried an undeniable authority. "You have come," it said, its tone filled with a quiet power. "The balance has been disturbed. The time of reckoning is at hand." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, their hearts heavy with fear and uncertainty. The guardian was a being of the forest, a being who knew its depths and its secrets. It was their last hope, the one who could help them restore the balance and save their village. But they knew that the forest would not give up its power so easily. They would have to prove that they understood the cost of their actions, that they were willing to pay the price for the forest's protection. That time of reckoning had arrived, and only through their courage and determination could they hope to restore the peace that had once existed between the land and its people. They would face whatever trials lay ahead, knowing that the forest's guardians were watching, waiting, and judging. The future of their village rested in their hands, and only by embracing the ancient power of the land could they hope to survive. The forest had spoken, and now they would listen. They would listen. The first light of dawn broke over the forest clearing, casting long shadows that stretched across the stone altar like the fingers of time itself. The air felt thick with anticipation, heavy with the presence of something ancient, something that had witnessed centuries of history unfold. The villagers stood in a tense silence, their hearts pounding in unison with the rhythmic beat of the earth beneath their feet. They had come to restore the balance, to seek the forgiveness of the guardians who had watched over the forest for as long as anyone could remember. But as the guardian tall, cloaked, and shrouded in mystery stepped forward from the shadows, they realized that the path ahead would not be as simple as they had hoped. This was not merely an act of supplication. It was a trial, and they were the ones who would have to face it. The guardian's voice echoed in the stillness of the clearing, soft yet undeniably commanding, carrying the weight of millennia. "The balance has been disturbed," the guardian intoned, its eyes hidden beneath the hood of its robe. "You have come to seek redemption, but to earn the forgiveness of the forest, you must first prove that you understand the true cost of your actions. The forest does not forgive lightly. It does not bow to the whims of those who trespass upon it without consequence." The villagers exchanged nervous glances, the gravity of the situation settling heavily upon them. They had thought that offering a simple gesture of respect, an offering to appease the guardians, would suffice. But They now understood that they were not dealing with a mere symbol of nature's wrath. The guardian's words were clear. There was a price to pay, a cost that they would have to bear. You seek to restore the balance, but you must first prove that you are worthy of the forest's mercy, the guardian continued, its voice like a whisper carried on the wind. To do so, you must undertake the trial of the ancient Pact. Only then will you understand the true power of the land you have disturbed. The villagers stood frozen, their minds racing as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. They had heard the stories, the tales passed down through generations of the trials that had been undertaken by those who had dared to challenge the guardians. These were not trials for the faint of heart. They were tests of character, of courage, and of the villagers' understanding of the delicate balance between humanity and nature. The trial was not merely a test of strength, but of wisdom, humility, and a willingness to acknowledge the wrongs that had been committed. As the villagers hesitated, the guardian took another step forward, its presence overwhelming. Do not think that you can simply appease the forest with offerings or prayers, the guardian warned, its voice growing stronger. The forest does not bend to those who approach it with arrogance or disregard. The forest is alive, and it will judge you by the measure of your actions. You will face the consequences of your ignorance, but only if you are brave enough to confront the truth of what you have done. The villagers' fear began to shift into something else, something deeper, something far more unsettling. They had not fully understood the enormity of their transgressions. They had pushed the boundaries of the forest, claimed its land, and taken from it without thought of the balance that had once existed between them and the earth. They had neglected the old ways, ignored the ancient pacts that had been forged in the distant past, and now they were being held accountable. The trial would not be a simple matter of appeasing the guardians with offerings. It would be a journey into the very heart of the forest, a journey that would test not just their strength, but their understanding of their place within the natural order. The villagers knew that they had no choice but to face the trial head-on. There would be no turning back, no second chances. If they failed, the forest would reclaim what had been taken, and the village would be left to face the consequences of their hubris. The trial will begin now, the guardian said, its voice steady and unyielding. Follow me into the heart of the forest, where the land will test your resolve. There, you will face the ancient guardians, beings older than time itself. Only when you have proven yourselves worthy will the balance be restored. Death. The villagers hesitated for a moment, but then, one by one, they nodded. They understood now that this was not just about saving their village. This was about understanding the ancient pact that had bound them to the land, the understanding that had been lost over the centuries. This was about humbling themselves before the guardians, acknowledging the land's power and restoring the balance that had been disturbed. They followed the guardian into the forest, each step heavy with the weight of what they had come to understand. The trees loomed overhead, their ancient branches intertwining like the very roots of time. The forest felt alive, pulsing with an energy that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. The further they ventured into the woods, the more they could feel the presence of something unseen, something that had been watching them, judging them. As they reached the center of the forest, they came upon an ancient stone circle, its weathered surface covered in moss and vines. The stones, though worn with age, stood tall and proud, their presence commanding reverence. This was the heart, of the forest, the place where the ancient guardians had once gathered. The villagers gathered in a circle around the stones, waiting for what was to come. The guardian, who had led them here, stepped forward and raised its arms in the air. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground, through the very air itself. The villagers felt their hearts race, their senses heightened. The trial was about to begin. You must prove that you understand the cost of your actions. "Da," the guardian said, its voice soft yet filled with a quiet authority. "The guardians will judge you, and only when you have earned their forgiveness will the balance be restored. You must face your fears, confront your mistakes, and demonstrate that you are ready to honor the pact that was once made." The villagers stood still, each one of them contemplating the gravity of the moment. They were about to face the guardians, the ancient beings who had protected the forest for generations. They were about to enter the trial that would determine the future of their village and the land they had come to take for granted. They knew the stakes were high, and they knew that failure would mean the end of everything they had built. But they were ready to confront their past, to face the trials ahead, and to restore the balance that had been lost. The first trial had begun. The forest was waiting. As the moon climbed higher in the night sky, the forest seemed to come alive with the echoes of the past. The air was thick with an ancient presence, the trees whispering secrets only the guardians knew. The villagers stood at the center of the stone circle, their hearts heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. The guardian, a towering figure cloaked in shadows, had just spoken of the trial they must face to restore balance. There was no turning back now. They had come this far, and they were about to enter the very heart of the forest, where the true challenge awaited. The air was cool, the ground beneath their feet damp with the dew that had settled over the forest as night fell. The stone circle was surrounded by dense trees, their branches twisting in unnatural patterns, like veins of ancient life intertwined. The guardians were said to be spirits of the forest, beings that had lived for centuries, watching over the land with unwavering vigilance. The villagers had heard stories of their power, of their ability to manipulate nature itself, to bend the very elements to their will, but none had ever truly seen them. The trial, it seemed, was not just a test of physical strength, but of the villagers' very souls. It would test their courage, their ability to confront their deepest fears, and their understanding of the delicate balance that had been disturbed. As they stood there, waiting for the trial to begin, the air grew heavier, charged with an energy, krita, that made their skin tingle. The guardian spoke once more, its voice resonating in the stillness, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in the bones of all who heard it. "The first test will be one of heart. You must each confront your own darkness, the shadows that dwell within you. The forest will show you the fears you have buried, the regrets you carry, and the guilt that weighs you down. You must face them, acknowledge them, and prove that you have the strength to overcome them." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had anticipated this. They had prepared for challenges of strength, for trials of endurance and skill, but they had not expected to confront their own inner demons. The idea of facing their own darkness was terrifying, but the guardian's voice was clear, and the path forward was unavoidable. They must face the trial, no matter the cost. One by one, they stepped forward into the circle, each person called sister to face the fears that lurked within them. The forest, alive with ancient power, responded to their presence, the trees shifting, the ground shifting beneath their feet as if the earth itself was breathing. Each villager stood still, closing their eyes as they took a deep breath, attempting to steady their nerves. As they opened their eyes, the world around them seemed to change. The once peaceful clearing transformed into a twisted, nightmarish version of itself. The trees loomed overhead, their branches distorted, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the ground. The sky, once a calm black, was now filled with dark clouds swirling in chaotic patterns. The sound of distant thunder echoed through the air, a constant reminder that the trial had begun. The villagers felt their hearts race as they began to see visions, ghostly images of their past mistakes, their fears made manifest before their eyes. One villager, a young woman named Anya, found herself standing in front of a mirror, looking into her own reflection. But this was not the face she knew. The reflection before her was distorted, twisted with the weight of her guilt. She saw herself, but she saw all the moments of weakness, all the times she had hurt others, all the mistakes she had made, magnified in her reflection. Her own eyes stared back at her with accusation. Anya stepped back, but the image did not fade. Instead, it grew larger, its voice now echoing in her ears. "You are weak. Anya, you abandoned your people when they needed you most. You failed them. You failed yourself." Her heart pounded in her chest. The words stung, cutting through her like a blade. The trial had brought her darkest thoughts to the surface, forcing her to confront the part of herself she had tried so desperately to forget. But in that moment, Anya realized something. She was not defined by her failures. She had the power to rise above them, to learn from her mistakes and become stronger. With that realization, the mirror shattered, the image of her guilt vanishing into the air. She was free, for now. But the trial was not over. As the vision faded, another villager, a man named Yarek, stood frozen as his past played before him. He saw the faces of those he had betrayed, the people he had abandoned in search of power. His heart sank as he watched the pain in their eyes, the fear, the distrust. The weight of his actions hung heavy on his chest, suffocating him. But like Anya, Yarek understood something vital. The past did not define him. It was the actions he took from this moment onward that would shape his future. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, his fear melting away like mist in the morning sun. As each villager faced their own demons, the forest seemed to come alive with energy, the air thick with the weight of their struggles. Some of the villagers faltered, some cried, some stood still, paralyzed by the visions before them. But one by one, they found the strength to move forward. They faced their fears, acknowledging them, but refusing to be ruled by them. The trial was not about erasing their past mistakes. It was about understanding them and embracing the power to change. When the final villager, Eldra, stepped forward, the clearing fell silent. Eldra was the oldest of them all, a woman whose face was lined with the weight of many years, many battles. She had seen much in her time, but nothing had prepared her for the trial she now faced. As she stood in the circle, the forest seemed to breathe around her, its whispers echoing in her mind. She saw the faces of those who had come before her, the elders who had taught her the ways of the forest, the people she had lost along the way. The weight of the centuries seemed to press down on her. But Eldra was not afraid. She had lived through too much, seen too much to be afraid of the forest's trial. With steady hands, she reached out and touched the ground, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath her. The shadows that had once threatened to consume her began to fade, replaced by the warmth of the sun rising above the horizon. The trial was over. The villagers had faced their fears, and in doing so, they had proven their worth to the guardians. The forest was silent now, the darkness retreating, the clearing bathed in the soft glow of morning light. They had passed the first test, but the trial was far from over. The guardians would not be appeased so easily, but for now, the villagers stood tall, their hearts lighter, their minds clearer. They had faced the darkness within themselves and emerged stronger for it. The balance had shifted, but the journey was just beginning. The second test awaited. As the early morning fog lifted from the forest floor, revealing the hidden paths, the villagers gathered in the clearing, their faces set with determination. The first trial had tested their hearts, forcing them to confront their deepest fears and darkest regrets. But now, as the Guardian appeared before them once again, it was clear that the challenges were far from over. The air around them buzzed with anticipation, thick with the presence of something ancient and powerful. The Guardian's voice resonated through the trees, deep and unwavering. You have faced the darkness within yourselves, but now you will face the trial of will. It is not your hearts that will be tested this time, but your resolve. You will need every ounce of strength and willpower to overcome what lies ahead. The villagers stood in silence, each person contemplating the words of the Guardian. There was no fear in their eyes this time, only a quiet acceptance, as if they had already made peace with the trials ahead. They knew they could not turn back. The journey had brought them to this point, and they would see it through to the end. The Guardian extended a long, skeletal arm, pointing towards the dense forest that lay beyond the clearing. The trial begins now. Walk through the forest, and you will encounter obstacles meant to test your determination. What you will face are not physical challenges, but trials of the mind and spirit. Do not falter. Do not give in. With that, the villagers began their journey, stepping into the forest with the weight of the world on their shoulders. The path ahead was narrow, winding, and filled with uncertainty. The towering trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches casting long shadows across the ground. The air grew colder, and the once vibrant colors of the forest faded into muted hues of gray and brown. It was as if the very life had been drained from the land. The first obstacle came without warning as they walked deeper into the forest. The villagers began to hear voices, whispers that seemed to float on the wind, soft and insistent. At first, they ignored them, but soon the voices grew louder, more demanding, as if trying to push them off their path. The whispers took on the form of their greatest desires and deepest regrets, speaking directly to their hearts. "You know what you need," the voice of Anya's longing whispered. "You could have it all, if only you turned back." The temptation was almost unbearable. Anya could feel her resolve slipping, the allure of her old life calling to her. The life she had left behind to face this trial. But, just as the whisper threatened to consume her, she clenched her fists and steadied herself. She remembered the first trial, the strength she had found in confronting her fears, and she knew she could do this. With a deep breath, she silenced the voices in her mind, pushing forward with renewed determination. She was not going to turn back. One by one, the villagers were faced with their own temptations. Yarek, whose past had been marked by betrayal, heard the voices of those he had wronged, pleading for him to abandon the journey and make amends. "You owe them," the voices taunted. "You can fix it all if you just return." For a moment Yarek hesitated, guilt clawing at his chest. But then he remembered the lessons of the previous trial. Facing his darkness had made him stronger, and he would not let his past dictate his future. With a firm resolve, he pressed on, his steps steady despite the haunting voices that continued to whisper his name. Eldra, the eldest among them, faced a different challenge. Her trial was not one of temptation, but of doubt. She had lived a long life, seen many things, and often wondered if her time had passed. "You are too old for this," the voice of doubt whispered, echoing in her mind. "Let the younger ones lead. You have no place in this." The words rang in her ears like a bell, and for a brief moment she wavered. But then, with all the wisdom and strength she had accumulated over her years, Eldra smiled softly to herself. She had lived through far greater trials than this, and she would not let age stop her from seeing this journey through. She was as much a part of this as any of them, and she would not be deterred. With each step they took, the villagers felt the weight of the trial lifting. The forest, once dark and oppressive, began to feel less threatening. The voices grew fainter, and the oppressive air began to clear. They had faced their doubts, their temptations, and their fears, and had come out stronger for it. As they walked deeper into the forest, the path ahead began to open up, the trees giving way to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested a single, glowing object. The villagers approached it with caution, their hearts racing with anticipation. The object was a small crystal, pulsing with a soft inner light. It seemed to call to them, as if it held the answers to everything they had sought. The guardian's voice echoed through the clearing. "You have passed the trial of will. You have shown that you can overcome the greatest challenges of the mind and spirit. The crystal is yours, but remember this: it is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of a new chapter." The villagers stood in awe, staring at the crystal that lay before them. They had made it through the trial, but they knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more obstacles to face, more trials to endure. But in that moment, they felt a sense of unity, of purpose, that they had not felt before. They had come together, each of them finding their own strength in the face of the challenges they had faced. With the crystal in their hands, they knew that the next chapter of their journey was waiting for them, and they were ready to face whatever came next. The crystal pulsed with an otherworldly light in their hands, casting shadows that flickered and danced across their faces. The villagers, gathered in the clearing, stared at the glowing object, their minds still swirling with the remnants of the trial they had just endured. It had been a test of will, one that had pushed them to their limits, yet here they were, standing stronger than before, having faced their darkest fears and doubts. They had endured the trial together, but now the crystal was theirs. It was a symbol of their success, a reminder of everything they had overcome. But the words of the guardian still echoed in their minds. "It is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of a new chapter." What did this mean? What lay beyond this point? What purpose did the crystal serve, and how would it guide them on the path ahead? These questions swirled like a storm in the minds of the villagers, each of them contemplating what this next step would mean. The forest around them, once foreboding and dark, now seemed to pulse with life. The oppressive air had lifted, replaced with a serene quiet, as though the trees themselves were waiting, listening, and watching them. It was as if the forest was alive, connected to the trials they had just faced, and now it was offering them something unknown, yet undoubtedly vital to their journey. What should we do now? Anya's voice broke the silence, her words slow, as though she too was weighing the implications of this moment. "We move forward," Yarek said, his spur voice firm, as he looked toward the path that led deeper into the forest. "We don't know where it will lead us, but we have to trust that it will take us to where we need to go." His words resonated with the others, who nodded in quiet agreement. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they had made it this far, and each trial had only made them stronger. With renewed resolve, they began to move forward. As they walked, the forest seemed to open before them, the trees parting to create a path that felt both welcoming and mysterious. The air, once heavy, now felt light, and the golden light of the crystal cast a warm glow that seemed to guide their steps. They followed it, uncertain of what they would find, but certain that they had to continue. Hours passed, and the forest changed with every step they took. The trees grew taller, their trunks more gnarled and ancient, as if they had walked for centuries. The air grew cooler, the sunlight filtering through the branches. casting long shadows that stretched along the ground like fingers reaching toward them. The path ahead remained unclear, yet the villagers pressed on, their hearts steady, knowing that they were bound to a destiny greater than themselves. The crystal pulsed softly, its light reflecting off the leaves that rustled gently in the breeze. Suddenly, the path before them opened into a vast, open space. The ground was flat and expansive, dotted with strange glowing flowers that seemed to shimmer in the light. The landscape stretched out in all directions, the horizon obscured by a thick mist that seemed to rise from the earth itself. At the center of this vast space stood a massive, ancient stone archway, its surface etched with symbols and runes that shimmered faintly. The villagers approached the archway, their hearts beating faster, for they knew this was no ordinary structure. This was something ancient, something that had stood for centuries, perhaps even millennia, and it was here for a reason. As they stood before it, they could feel a strange pull, as if the archway was calling to them, beckoning them forward. "Is this the next trial?" Eldra asked softly, her voice filled with awe as she gazed up at the stone arch. "It might be," Anya replied, her hand tightening around the crystal. "But we have to go through it to find out." With a deep breath, they stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the archway. The world around them seemed to shift. The air grew thick with energy, and the mist that had once obscured the horizon now swirled around them, forming shapes and patterns that seemed to dance in the air. The stone beneath their feet felt solid, but the world around them was anything but stable. The sounds of the forest faded away, replaced by a deep, rumbling hum that seemed to come from the very ground, say itself. And then, from within the mist, a voice echoed a voice that was neither male nor female, ancient yet timeless, filled with the wisdom of ages. "You have reached the crossroads," the voice said, its tone both welcoming and foreboding. "You are here not by chance, but by design. The trials you have faced, the choices you have made, have led you to this moment. You must choose now. Will you continue on the path of the trials, or will you step beyond into the unknown?" The voice paused, allowing the weight of the question to settle over them. The villagers looked at one another, their minds filled with uncertainty. They had faced many trials of heart, mind, and spirit, but what did this final choice mean? Was this the end of their journey, or was it simply another beginning? "What lies beyond the unknown?" Yarick asked, his voice steady, though the question lingered in the air like a heavy fog. "Beyond the unknown lies the truth," the voice responded, Kit. "It is not for you to know what awaits, only to decide whether you are prepared to face it. The path beyond will reveal what you need, but not necessarily what you desire. You must trust in your choices, for only through trust can you find your way." Key with those words, the voice fell silent, leaving the villagers standing in the midst of the swirling mist. They had come so far, endured so much, and yet the most important decision of their journey lay before them now. Would they step forward, into the unknown, or would they turn back? The crystal in Anya's hand pulsed with a steady rhythm, as if it too was awaiting their decision. The air grew heavy once more, filled with the weight of the choices ahead. It was clear that the journey was far from over, and whatever awaited them on the other side of the archway would require every ounce of strength and resolve. They had gained with a final steadying breath. Anya raised her head and stepped forward, followed closely by the others. The path ahead may have been shrouded in mist, but they knew one thing for certain: they would face it together, no matter what it brought. And with that, the villagers crossed the threshold, stepping into the unknown. The journey continued. As the villagers stepped beyond the archway, they were immediately engulfed in a thick, pulsating fog that seemed to twist and turn, obscuring their vision. The air around them felt charged, heavy with an energy they couldn't quite comprehend, as though the very fabric of reality was bending. They had stepped into a place between places, a realm where time seemed to blur and space felt endless, yet confining at the same time. The forest, the familiar clearing, the vast sky, everything they had known had vanished, replaced by this strange, shifting mist. The only constant was the steady pulse of the crystal in Anya's hand, its soft glow acting as a beacon in the darkness. The villagers, though uncertain, clung to the light as though it was their lifeline, the thread that would guide them through this ethereal place. The fog seemed to stretch on forever, with no sign of any landmarks or paths. It was as if they were walking in a dream, or perhaps caught between the world they had known and something far older, more primal. Their footsteps were muffled by the thick air, and the only sound they could hear was the faint, eerie hum that seemed to emanate from all around them. "What is this place?" Eldra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had always been the brave one, the one to lead with her strength and will. But now, even she seemed hesitant, as if unsure of the very ground beneath her feet. "I don't know," Anya replied, her grip on the crystal tightening, as if drawing strength from its glow. "But we must keep moving. We have to trust that this is part of our journey." There was no hesitation in her voice, no doubt in her words, but even she could not deny the unsettling feeling that clung to the air. The fog parted slightly in front of them, and they saw Itan's enormous towering figure standing motionless in the distance. At first, it seemed like a shadow, a mere silhouette against the mist. But as they approached, its form became clearer. Ancient, stone statue, carved with intricate symbols that pulsed faintly with a blue light. It was unlike any statue they had ever seen, its eyes hollow and unblinking, yet somehow alive with a presence that sent chills down their spines. "Is that alive?" Yarek asked, his voice low and uncertain. "No," Anya said, her voice filled with conviction. "It's a guardian, I think." "A test, a test," Eldra echoed, a frown crossing her brow. "What kind of test?" As if in response to her question, the stone figure's eyes began to glow, its mouth opening in a silent, unspoken command. The mist around them thickened, swirling with a new-found intensity. The air became colder, and the faint hum grew louder, resonating deep within their bones. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the villagers staggered, trying to maintain their balance. The statue's hand, massive and stone-like, began to rise from its resting position, and with it the fog seemed to part, revealing the path that led onward. The villagers exchanged wary glances, unsure of what was happening, but knowing that they had little choice but to continue. With the path now clear, they hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, their eyes fixed on the glowing statue, which now stood as a silent sentinel in the midst of the mist. Each step they took seemed to echo in the silence that surrounded them, the tension mounting with every footfall. The air grew colder still, the ground harder beneath their feet, and as they walked deeper into the mist, the villagers began to feel the weight of their journey more than ever before. Every step felt like a decision, every breath a reminder that they were walking into the unknown. The road ahead was unclear, but the light from the crystal remained their guide, steady and unwavering. "Do you feel that?" Yarek asked suddenly, his voice tense. "It's like we're being watched." The others nodded in agreement. There was a presence here, something they couldn't see but could feel all around them. It was as though the very air was alive with intent, as if something or someone was waiting for them to make the next move. And then the path opened up, before them. and the villagers found themselves standing at the edge of a vast, endless chasm. The mist stretched on into infinity, and at the farthest edge of the chasm they could make out a distant light, a light that seemed to flicker and pulse like the heart of some great force, beckoning them forward. But the chasm was wider than any they had encountered before. The ground beneath their feet seemed unstable, as if it might give way at any moment. The villagers stood at the edge, peering into the abyss, the sense of something ancient and powerful pressing upon them. "How do we cross?" Anya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The words seemed to hang in the air, unanswered for a moment, as the villagers turned to the statue. Its eyes still glowed faintly, and though it remained motionless, there was a sense that it knew exactly what they were facing. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed from the depths of the chasm, and a stone bridge began to rise from the darkness below. The bridge was narrow, its surface uneven and jagged, but it stretched across the chasm, leading to the distant light. The villagers knew that this was the only way forward. They had no choice but to cross. With a shared glance, they stepped onto the bridge, their footsteps tentative at first, as the stone beneath them creaked with the weight of their journey. Each step seemed to send a tremor through the bridge, and they could hear the faint groaning of the stone, as though it were warning them. But they pressed on. The light grew brighter with every step they took, and the mist seemed to thin around them, though it still clung to the edges of the chasm. The air felt thick with magic, as if the very fabric of reality was being pulled and reshaped before their eyes. The crystal pulsed with an increasing intensity, its light reflecting off the mist, casting strange shadows along the bridge. Then, as they neared the end of the bridge, a deep voice, ancient and thunderous, filled the air. "You have passed the first trial," it boomed. "But the path ahead is not without more challenges. You will face what you fear most, and only through strength and unity will you succeed." The villagers hesitated for a moment, fear creeping into their hearts as the weight of the voice's words sank in. What did it mean? What more challenges awaited them? But they had come this far, and with the light of the crystal guiding them, they stepped forward, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The path was shrouded in mystery, but they had already overcome so much, and there was no turning back now. The fog began to thin, and the villagers continued, their hearts beating in unison, ready for whatever trials awaited them in the shadowy realm beyond. The journey through the mist was only just beginning, and they knew that their strength would be tested in ways they could not yet imagine. Had caught her eye in the corner of the path. The others, sensing her hesitation, followed her gaze, but saw nothing, just the endless fog, swirling and shifting in strange patterns. "What is it?" Yarek asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eldra didn't answer immediately. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling. "I saw something, a figure. It looked like me." The others exchanged puzzled looks. "What do you mean? Like you?" Anya asked, taking a cautious step forward. Eldra shook her head, clearly shaken. "It was like me, but different. It was me, but not. It had the same face, the same body, but its eyes. They were hollow, empty. The air around them seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive." Anya could feel her pulse quicken as she glanced around, her eyes darting from side to side, but there was no sign of the figure Eldra had seen. "It must be an illusion," Yarek said, trying to sound confident. "A trick of the mist." But even as he spoke, his words felt hollow, as if they were not meant for him to hear, but for something else, something far older and darker than the fog that surrounded them. A sudden rustle from the trees ahead broke the silence, and the villagers froze, their breath caught in their throats. Something was watching them. Anya could feel it now, a presence looming just beyond the reach of the crystal's light. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she instinctively reached for the crystal, her fingers tightening around its cool surface. And then, as if the mist itself had parted, they saw its figures, hundreds of them, rising from the shadows, like wraiths. The villagers instinctively stepped back, their hearts pounding in their chests as the figures moved closer. At first they seemed like shadows, indistinct and fluid, but as they came into the light, their forms solidified. They were like reflections, shadows of the villagers themselves, each one mirroring their every movement. Eldra's reflection moved in perfect synchrony with her, but its eyes were empty, hollow, just as she had described. Yarek's reflection, too, was a perfect copy of him, yet its face seemed to twist with an unsettling smile, one that sent chills crawling up his spine. Yanya's reflection stood still, watching her with a cold, calculating gaze. The villagers stood motionless, paralyzed by the figures that had appeared before them. Each reflection seemed to move with a life of its own, but there was something off about them, something unnatural. They weren't quite right. "This is the trial," Anya whispered, her voice barely audible. "The trial of reflection. We must face ourselves." The realization hit them all at once. The figures before them weren't just reflections, they were the very essence of their fears, their doubts, their regrets. They were the things they had buried deep within themselves, the parts of them they had never truly confronted. The reflections were not enemies in the traditional sense, but challenges, each one holding a mirror to their deepest, darkest truths. As if on cue, the reflections began to speak, their voices distorted and hollow, carrying the weight of their unspoken fears. "You fear losing control," one of the reflections said, its voice eerily similar to Anya's. "You fear failing those who depend on you." Another reflection, this time of Eldra, stepped forward, its eyes gleaming with an unsettling knowing. "You fear being weak," it taunted. "You fear that you're not strong enough to lead." Yarek's reflection, its smile twisted into something cruel, leaned in closer. "You fear the unknown," it hissed. "You fear your own power, and that it will destroy you." Each of them heard their own fears spoken aloud, the words hanging heavy in the air. The villagers recoiled, but there was nowhere to run, no way to escape the reflections. They were trapped in this trial, forced to confront the parts of themselves they had spent years trying to bury. "This is a test," Anya said, her voice steady despite the rising panic in her chest. "We must face them. We must accept what we fear and overcome it." The villagers nodded, though their faces were pale with fear. Each of them took a deep breath, their hearts pounding in their chests as they prepared to confront their reflections. A moment stretched out, each second feeling like an eternity. And then, as if in response to their resolve, the reflections began to change. They no longer mimicked their movements, they became something else entirely. Eldra's reflection stepped forward, its form twisting and shifting like smoke. The eyes that had once been hollow now blazed with a fiery intensity. "I am not afraid," Eldra said, her voice firm. "I will lead. I will not be weak." The reflection paused, its fiery gaze meeting hers, and then it faded into the mist, leaving behind only the faintest trace of smoke. Yarek's reflection followed suit, its twisted smile disappearing as it too vanished into the fog. "I will face the unknown," Yarek declared. "I will embrace my power." One by one, the villagers faced their fears, their reflections fading as they accepted what they had once feared most. Anya's reflection stepped forward, its cold, calculating gaze no longer threatening. "I will protect them," Anya said, her voice resolute. I will not let my fears control me." The reflection nodded, as if in acknowledgment, and disappeared into the mist. With each reflection that faded, the mist around them began to lift, but oppressive weight of fear lifting from their hearts. The path before them cleared, revealing a new horizon of future unclouded by doubt or regret. The trial had been passed, but they knew that more challenges awaited them. This was only the beginning, but for now. The villagers were united, stronger than ever, having faced their greatest fears and overcome them. The trial of reflection had not broken them, had forged them into something stronger, and with that they continued their journey, their hearts lighter, their resolve unshaken, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The sky above the village darkened suddenly, as if in response to an unseen call, and the once tranquil air now hummed with a rising tension. The villagers, who had been slowly returning to their everyday tasks after the trial of reflection, felt it too, a sharp, instinctive unease that spread through the village like wildfire. The crystal that had once illuminated their path began to flicker, its steady glow faltering as the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble. Anya, Eldra, Yarek, and the others exchanged uneasy glances. Something was coming, something they couldn't yet see but could feel building on the horizon, as though nature itself was preparing to unleash its fury. The wind picked up, first a gentle breeze, then a harsh gust that swept through the village, sending the leaves on the trees scattering into the air like whispers. The once quiet, peaceful square now seemed to hum with a low, rumbling energy, as though it too were holding its breath in anticipation. The trees around them creaked and groaned under the growing pressure, their branches swaying violently against the unseen force. It wasn't long before the first drop of rain hit the cobblestones, a small, almost hesitant thing, but it was enough to send a ripple of dread through the villagers. They knew this wasn't just a storm, it was something far darker, far more dangerous. The clouds overhead churned in violent, unnatural patterns, swirling together in ominous spirals as the wind began to howl, tearing at the roofs of the houses and sending the market stalls crashing to the ground. Eldra, who had been standing near the edge of the square, took a step back, instinctively seeking cover from the storm that seemed to be encroaching upon them. Her eyes widened in realization, and she called out to the others. "It's here," she said, her voice barely audible over the rising winds. The storm. The one the legends spoke of. Yarek's expression darkened, his face hardening as he turned to face her. "The storm that comes to test us," he muttered, the weight of the words sinking in like a stone in his chest. "We can't hide from it. We have to face it, or it will consume us." Anya, ever the leader, stood tall, her hand gripping the crystal tightly as it flickered in her palm. "We've faced our fears. We've passed the trial," she said, her voice steady despite the growing storm around them. "Now, we face the storm, Ka." As if on cue, the wind howled with terrifying force, and the rain began to pour in sheets, drenching them in an instant. The once quiet village was now a battleground, the storm's fury overwhelming everything in its path. The crystal in Anya's hand pulsed once more, its glow fading and brightening in rapid succession, struggling to maintain its power in the face of the tempest. She held it high above her head, her eyes narrowing against the deluge, and felt, quote, the pull of something deeper within her, a connection to the very heart of the world, to the forces of nature that were now swirling around them in a violent dance. The ground beneath their feet began to quake, as if the earth itself were alive, as though it were trying to shake them free from their very existence. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the distant rumble of thunder sent a jolt of fear through their bones. The storm was not just an external force, it was something far more insidious, something that threatened to tear apart everything they had fought for. "We can't let it take us," Anya shouted over the wind, her voice fierce. "We have the power to fight back." Her words cut through the roar of the storm, and the others nodded, rallying together in the face of the growing chaos. They had faced their fears, overcome their reflections, and now they would face the storm. Eldra stepped forward, her face set in determination. "We will stand together," she said, her voice ringing out. "The storm can't break us. We are stronger than it." The wind howled in response, as if mocking her defiance, but she stood firm. "We are one," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "and nothing can tear us apart." Yarek, his jaw clenched, stepped beside her, his hand gripping his sword tightly. "The storm is just a test," he said. "It's testing our resolve, testing our unity. But we won't break. Not now, not ever." The villagers formed a circle, standing together. In the heart of the storm. The crystal in Anya's hand began to pulse once more, its light growing brighter with each passing second as the wind and rain battered them. They could feel the storm's power pressing against them, its raw energy threatening to overwhelm their wills. But they held fast, their resolve unshaken. The crystal's light grew blinding, cutting through the storm like a beacon of hope, a symbol of their unity. As the storm raged around them, the villagers began to chant, their voices rising together. In a single, powerful cry, they chanted the words that had been passed down through generations, words of strength, of unity, of defiance. And with every word, the storm seemed to lose its power, the wind dying down, the rain lessening, as though the storm itself was being pushed back by the strength of their combined will. For hours, they stood together, holding their ground, their voices unwavering, their hearts united. And as the last of the storm clouds began to dissipate, the village was left in a profound silence. The ground beneath them settled, the air cleared, and the last remnants of the storm melted away, leaving only the faintest trace of mist hovering over the earth. The villagers stood still, breathless, in the aftermath of the storm. They had faced it, together, and they had triumphed. They had proven that nothing, no force, no storm, no fear could break them. As the sun began to break through the clouds, casting a golden light over the village, Anya lowered the crystal, its light dimming but still strong in her hand. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with a quiet awe. Eldra, standing beside her, nodded. "We're stronger than we know," she said softly. Yarek, his face grim but resolute, clapped his hand on Anya's shoulder. "And we'll face whatever comes next," he said. "Together." And with that, the villagers turned and began to rebuild, their hearts full of renewed strength and their spirits unbroken. The storm had come, but it had not defeated them. They had faced it and emerged victorious. Them through the storm. She knew, though, that this was only the beginning. They had faced the storm, yes, but what came next was uncertain. There was still much to learn, much to do. The challenges they had already overcome were only the first steps in a journey that would test them in ways they couldn't yet fathom. But in this moment, beneath the soft glow of the morning sun, there was a quiet sense of triumph. They had survived the storm, and they had done so together. That soothed the village, once trembling under the force of nature's fury, now stood calm, peaceful, bathed in the gentle warmth of the new day. The square was filled with the soft hum of life returning to normal. People began to clear away the remnants, of the storm, the broken market stalls, the fallen branches, the scattered debris. Others tended to their homes, repairing what had been damaged in the Tempest's wake. Everywhere Anya looked, there was movement, purpose. The rhythm of the village, once slowed by the storm's chaos, had resumed its steady pace. Life was returning, and it was returning stronger. Anya turned to the others, Eldra and Yarek standing by her side, their expressions thoughtful. The storm had come, yes, but it had also revealed something profound, a unity in the village that had been tested, but dear, not broken. Eldra was the first to speak. "We've come through the worst of it," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Now we rebuild, but we rebuild stronger. We rebuild as one." Her words struck a chord with those gathered around them, a gentle murmur of agreement spreading through the crowd. "This storm was a test, and we passed it," Yarek added, his voice deep and resonant. "But there are more tests ahead. The world is changing, and we must be ready to face whatever comes." The villagers nodded, their faces resolute. They knew the truth of Yarek's words. This trial had been only the beginning. But the fear that had once gripped them, fear of the storm, fear of the unknown, had been replaced by something far more powerful. Hope. Hope, tempered by experience, strengthened by the storm's fury, and fueled by their shared commitment to each other. Anya stepped forward, her heart swelling with pride. "We are not the same as we were yesterday," she said, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "We are not just survivors. We are stronger, united, ready for whatever comes next." The villagers stood a little taller, their posture more assured. Their faces were no longer etched with fear, but with determination, with purpose. The storm had tried to tear them apart, but instead it had brought them closer. And in its aftermath, they had discovered the strength within themselves that they had never known they possessed. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the villagers began to disperse, moving toward their tasks with renewed energy, with a sense of shared purpose. The crystal in Anya's hand pulsed again, its light brightening as though in response to their collective resolve. There was still much work to be done, but Anya knew they would face it together. Whatever the world had in store for them, whatever trials they would face them as one. The bond between them had been forged in the heat of adversity, and nothing could break it now. And as the day unfolded before them, the village moved forward into the future stronger, united, ready to embrace whatever came next. The storm was over. The dawn had arrived, and with it, a new beginning for the village, and for each of them. Anya stood in the center of the square, watching the life of the village continue to unfold around her. The sky above was clear now, the dark clouds having melted away in the storm's wake, and the gentle warmth of the sun bathed everything in its light. The earth was wet beneath her feet, the air fresh, and the promise of a new day hung in the air like a sweet, unspoken promise. The trials of the past were now behind them, but Anya knew they had only just begun their journey. The path ahead was uncertain, the challenges to come unknown, but she felt a deep sense of conviction stirring within her. They had faced the storm, and they had emerged victorious. They would face whatever came next with the same strength, the same unity, the same unbreakable bond. As the day wore on, the villagers worked side by side to rebuild what had been lost, to restore what had been damaged. And in that quiet, steady work, there was a deep, unspoken understanding. Together, they could overcome anything. The dawn of new beginnings was not just the rise of a new day, it was the start of something much larger, much greater. It was the beginning of a new era, one defined not by fear or uncertainty, but by strength, unity, and hope. And with that, Anya knew, that they were ready. Ready for whatever the world had in store for them. Ready to face the future together. The days following the storm were filled with a quiet determination that spread across the village like the first rays of sunlight after a long dark night. The once damaged buildings slowly began to regain their former shape. The earth softened, by the rain taking on a fresh, rejuvenated appearance, and the people who had once feared the storm now felt emboldened by their survival. Yet, as Anya walked through the village one crisp morning, her thoughts were not on the repairs or the rebuilding, but on something else entirely, something deeper, more personal. The storm had not only altered the village, but it had also stirred something within her, something that she couldn't quite explain. The crystal, which had guided them through the storm, now seemed to pulse with an energy that was different, more urgent. It was as though it was calling to her, whispering a message she was yet to fully understand. She could feel it, the pull deep in her bones, a sensation that grew stronger each day. She knew it was time to leave, to venture beyond the familiar, both borders of the village, and discover what lay beyond. But the uncertainty of such a journey, the unknown risks that awaited her, kept her tethered to the safety of what she knew. She had spent her whole life within these borders, safe among the people she loved, secure in the routines that had defined her existence. To step beyond them, to face the vast unknown, was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. The call of adventure had always been there, lurking in the corners of her mind, but it had been drowned out by the comfort of the village life, the quiet, predictable rhythm of the days. Now, however, the storm had stirred something inside her, something that could no longer be ignored. She turned to Eldra, who had been her constant companion through all the trials they had faced. Eldra, with her calm demeanor and unshakable resolve, had always been a steady force in Anya's life. "Eldra," Anya said softly, her voice almost drowned out by the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. "I think it's time for me to leave. The crystal ... it calls to me. There's something out there I need to find. Something important." Eldra, who had been studying the intricate patterns of the woven fabric in her hands, paused and looked up, her gaze steady and knowing. She had long sensed that the storm was only a beginning, that the path ahead for Anya would lead her far beyond the village's borders. "I've felt it too," Eldra replied, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of something deeper. "The crystal has always had a purpose, a power beyond our understanding. It is not merely a guide through storms, but a key to something larger." "But what if I'm not ready?" Anya's voice faltered, a flicker of doubt in her chest. "What if I'm not strong enough to face what lies out there?" Eldra's expression softened, and she stood, walking over to Anya with a sense of quiet strength. She placed a hand on Anya's shoulder, grounding her in the moment. "You are stronger than you think," she said, "and the journey you're about to undertake is not one you can take alone. We are all connected to the land, to the crystal, and to each other. The bond that ties us will guide you, even when you feel lost." Anya felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, but the fear still lingered in the pit of her stomach. She had spent her life knowing the village, knowing the faces of the people who lived there, knowing the paths that led to the hills and the rivers. Leaving all of that behind was daunting. Yet, deep inside, she knew that the call was not something she could ignore. It was something greater than fear, greater than comfort. It was a force that could not be denied. As the days passed, Anya began to prepare herself for the journey ahead. She packed only the essentials: food, water, the crystal, and the small tools that would help her along the way. The villagers, though they did not fully understand her decision, respected it. They had seen the strength within her during the storm, and they knew that whatever path she chose to follow would be one worth walking. On the eve of her departure, Anya stood at the edge of the village, looking out into the vast expanse of wilderness beyond. The mountains, once distant and intimidating, now seemed like a beckoning challenge. The forest, dark and mysterious, whispered promises of secrets waiting to be uncovered. She had never ventured far beyond the safety of the village. But now, with the crystal pulsing softly in her hand, she felt ready. She was not alone. The journey ahead was uncertain, and there would be moments of doubt. Moments when the fear would threaten to overwhelm her. But she knew that she was not defined by her fear. She was defined by the choices she made, by the courage to follow the call. And so, with a deep breath, she stepped forward into the unknown. The first few steps were the hardest, but as she walked, the pull of the crystal seemed to guide her, leading her down a path that was hidden from the eyes of others. The village faded behind her, becoming a distant memory. But its lessons, its strength, and the love of the people she had left behind remained with her, wrapped around her like a protective cloak. As Anya journeyed into the wilderness, the forest seemed to respond to her presence. The trees swayed gently in the wind, their leaves whispering her name, while the animals, once hidden, appeared at the edges of her vision, watching her with curious eyes. It was as though the land itself recognized her, acknowledged her purpose. She was no longer just Anya of the village. She was something more now. She was part of a larger story, one that had yet to be written, and the pages of that story were waiting for her to turn them. The call to adventure was not just a call to explore the world beyond it, was a call to discover who she truly was, to unlock the mysteries of the crystal and the forces that had shaped her world. And as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the earth, Anya knew that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead was filled with challenges and uncertainty, but it was a journey she would face with courage, with determination, and with the knowledge that she was not alone. The crystal's light flickered in her hand, a silent reminder that she was exactly where she needed to be. As Anya continued her journey, the land around her seemed to unfold in a way she had never imagined. What had once been a dark, foreboding wilderness now appeared as a vast expanse of untapped beauty. The dense trees, their trunks twisting and reaching toward the sky, stood like silent sentinels watching her every step, and the underbrush was thick with the sounds of life-chirping birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional distant howl of a wolf. She couldn't help but feel a connection to the very earth beneath her feet. The soil, soft and welcoming, seemed to guide her as much as the crystal she carried. It pulsed lightly, almost imperceptibly, in her pocket, a constant reminder of task that lay before her. Though the call to adventure had been clear, the path she walked was anything but straightforward. Each turn, each fork in the road, seemed to lead her deeper into uncharted territory, and with every step, she was forced to confront the uncertainty of what lay ahead. She had been prepared to face challenges, but the nature of those challenges was becoming clearer with each passing day. This journey was not just about the destination, but about the transformation that would come with it. As she ventured deeper into the wilderness, the weight of her decision began to settle into her bones. She was no longer a girl bound by the familiar paths of her village. Now, she was a wanderer, a seeker of answers, a soul tethered to the pulse of something much larger than herself. The crystal had not only guided her physically, but had also awakened something within her sense of purpose, a deep knowing that she was meant for something more. Yet, with this new awareness came doubt. Every now and then, as she walked through the thick woods, a shadow of fear would creep into her mind. What if she wasn't strong enough for the trials ahead? What if the crystal had led her down the wrong path? The questions haunted her, but she refused to allow them to control her. She had come too far to turn back. The weight of the crystal in her pocket reminded her that the answers she sought were not easily obtained. It was not just a physical journey, but a spiritual one as well, and every step she took felt like a step toward her true self. There were moments, however, when she would stop, looking around, as though she had missed something. The land was vast, the forest deep, and the sea was only one small part of it. Would she be able to make a difference? Could one person truly change the course of history? The thought seemed too grand, but it was the only thought she could hold on to. She had always felt small in comparison to the world, but now, with the crystal pulsing softly against her chest, she wondered if perhaps she had always been a part of something much greater than she had realized. The wilderness seemed to whisper to her as if answering her unspoken questions. The wind carried a soft hum, like a distant song she could almost make out. The trees rustled with an ancient wisdom, as though they knew something she didn't. Even the animals that watched her with silent curiosity seemed to understand that she was not an ordinary traveler. She was on a mission that would shape not only her fate but the fate of many. As the days turned into weeks, Anya's journey began to take on a rhythm. There were moments of stillness when she would sit by the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker, and moments of intense focus when she would push forward despite exhaustion, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She began to understand that the journey wasn't about reaching some distant goal, but about the experiences she gathered along the way. Every encounter, whether with a kind stranger or a perilous creature, taught her something new. Her skills as a survivor grew, but so did her awareness of her inner strength. She wasn't just walking through the wilderness. She was learning to trust herself, to trust the subtle guidance of the crystal, and to recognize the power that resided within her. One evening, as she made camp near the edge of a vast river, Anya felt a sudden shift in the air. The forest, which had always been so alive with the sounds of nature, fell silent. The birds stopped singing, and the rustling of the trees ceased. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. She stood and looked around, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. Something was coming, something she could not yet see, but she felt its presence deep in her bones. The crystal in her pocket began to thrum softly, as though it sensed the same danger. Her hand instinctively went to it, but before she could pull it out, a low growl echoed from the darkness of the trees. She wasn't alone. The sense of unease that had been growing within her now blossomed into full-blown fear. From the shadows, two glowing eyes appeared, followed by the shape of a massive creature, its fur dark as midnight, and its teeth gleaming in the dim light. A wolf, but not just any wolf. This one was larger than any she had ever seen, its presence commanding and powerful. It was as though the forest itself had sent the creature to test her. Anya's breath caught in her throat as she slowly backed away, the wolf's gaze never leaving her. Her heart raced, but she remembered the words Eldra had once told her. In moments of fear, trust in your instincts. They will guide you when you cannot see the way. She drew the crystal from her pocket and held it out in front of her, the soft light from within it cutting through the dark. The wolf stopped, its growl turning into a low whine. It seemed to hesitate, as though unsure of what to do next. For a moment, the world stood still. Anya's hand shook, but she steadied it, holding the crystal firmly. The light from within grew brighter, the crystal responding to the energy in the air. Slowly, the wolf took a step back. The tension in the air eased, and with a final look, the creature retreated into the darkness, vanishing as silently as it had appeared. Anya exhaled sharply, her legs trembling beneath her. She had faced the fear, but it had been no easy feat. She had survived, and in doing so, she realized something crucial. This journey would test her, but it would also reveal the strength within her that she had yet to fully understand. The night passed in uneasy silence, but when the morning came, Anya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The forest had not only tested her, but it had also shown her the path ahead was not one she could walk easily. but one she was meant to walk. Her fears would no longer hold her back. The adventure that awaited her was one she would face with courage, with the crystal as her guide, and the wilderness as her teacher. The dense forest, which had once seemed an insurmountable challenge, now felt almost like a trusted companion to Anya. She had learned its language in the quiet moments when the world was still, its rustling leaves, the whispers of the wind, except the subtle shift in the air when danger approached. Every step she took was more assured than the last, her senses heightened, attuned to the rhythm of the land. The crystal had grown warmer in her pocket, its glow steady and strong, a silent pulse that matched the beat of her heart. Anya had long since learned to trust its guidance, even when the way ahead seemed unclear. The journey had been full of uncertainty, but each day brought a new understanding of herself, a deepening of her connection to the world around her. She was no longer just a traveler. She was becoming part of the land itself. Yet, even as she moved deeper into the heart of the forest, a feeling of foreboding lingered in the back of her mind. There was a sense that something was coming, something that would test everything she had learned. The path before her grew narrower, the trees taller, their branches intertwining to form an almost impenetrable canopy. The light that filtered through was dim, casting long shadows on the ground. It felt as though she had entered a place untouched by time, a world that existed in a balance between light and dark, life and death. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and every sound seemed amplified. The soft crunch of her boots on the forest floor, the occasional snap of a twig breaking underfoot. It was in this silence, broken only by the gentle hum of nature, that she began to notice the subtle changes in the world around her. The forest seemed to be watching her, as if it were aware of her every move. The wind no longer whispered gently through the trees. Now it seemed to carry with it a sense of urgency, like a warning. The once peaceful rustling of the leaves turned into a constant murmur, as if the forest itself were speaking in a language she could not yet understand. She had learned to rely on her instincts, but now they told her something was wrong. She stopped, her senses alert, and listened carefully. The forest held its breath, and then, from deep within the shadows, a low growl reached her ears. The sound sent a chill down her spine, her heart racing as she instinctively reached for the crystal. It pulsed in her hand, its light flickering, as though it too could sense the danger that lay ahead. The growl grew louder, and Anya knew she wasn't alone. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of something wild and predatory. She felt a cold presence moving through the forest, a presence that was not natural, not part of the delicate balance she had come to know. Slowly, she backed away, her eyes scanning the surrounding trees. The growl echoed again, closer this time, and then, as if from the very shadows themselves, a pair of glowing eyes emerged. Anya froze, her breath caught in her throat as she took in the creature before her. It was massive, far larger than the wolf she had encountered earlier. Its fur was black as the night, its eyes gleaming with a feral hunger. The creature moved with a predatory grace, its muscles rippling beneath its coat, every movement calculated, deliberate. It was a hunter, and she was its prey. The growl deepened, vibrating through her bones. As the creature took a step forward, its gaze fixed on her with an intensity that sent a shiver through her. Anya's heart raced, but she refused to back down. This was what she had been preparing for. This was the test she had known would come. She raised the crystal, the light from within growing brighter, casting an ethereal glow across the darkened forest. The creature paused, its ears twitching at the sight of the light. For a moment, everything was still, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The tension was unbearable. Anya's hands shook as she held the crystal, her thoughts racing. She had no weapon, no defense other than the crystal. She had no choice but to trust it. She focused all her energy into the stone, willing it to respond. The light from the crystal flared brighter, and for a moment it was as though time itself had stopped. The forest seemed to pause, the creature's growl dying in its throat, its eyes narrowing in confusion. Then, with a sudden flash of light, the creature lunged, but Anya was ready. She held the crystal before her, and with a surge of energy, the light erupted from it, a beam of pure force that struck the creature square in the chest. The creature recoiled, its growl turning into a pained howl as it stumbled backward, its eyes wide with shock. Anya's heart hammered in her chest, but she did not falter. She continued to focus on the crystal, the light intensifying, the force of it pushing the creature back with every pulse. The creature snarled, its claws scraping, creed the ground as it tried to regain its footing. But the light from the crystal was too strong. With one final desperate roar, the creature lunged again, but the beam of light collided with it, sending the beast flying into the trees. The forest fell silent once more. Anya stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her hands still trembling from the force of the crystal's power. The air felt thick, heavy, as though the forest itself were waiting for something. Slowly, she lowered the crystal, the light fading, and the darkness of the forest seemed to close in around her once again. The creature was gone, but Anya knew it was not the end. The forest was not done with her yet. She had passed one test, but there would be more. She turned away, her heart still pounding, and continued on the path before her. The forest had revealed its dangers, but it had also shown her that she had the power to face them. With the crystal in her hand, Anya pressed on, knowing that the true heart of the forest awaited her, and that she was stronger than she had ever known. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the desolate landscape that stretched before Anya. Every step she took seemed to echo in the hollow silence of the night. The only sound, the crunch of dried leaves beneath her boots. The forest had changed since she had first entered. Its once welcoming embrace, now a maze of twisted, gnarled trees that seemed to close in around her. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, felt suffocating, as if the very atmosphere had turned against her. The crystal in her hand pulsed faintly, its glow flickering like a dying flame. But she could sense that it was still with her, still guiding her through the overwhelming darkness. Her breath was shallow, and her heart pounded loudly in her chest, as if it too could feel the weight of the forest pressing down upon them. Anya had faced trials before, had faced dangers and challenges that had tested her strength and willpower. But this was different. The forest was alive with something ancient, something that lurked in the shadows, waiting for her to make a mistake. The once familiar path she had followed had disappeared, leaving her with only the feeling of being watched, of being hunted by something that she could not see, but could feel in every fiber of her being. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, above, casting twisted shadows across the ground, and Anya's senses heightened as she felt the presence of something or someone lurking just beyond her sight. She turned quickly, her eyes scanning the forest, but there was nothing there, only the silence and the shadows. Her pulse quickened, and she forced herself to steady her breath. There was no time for fear, not now, not when she was so close to uncovering the truth, to discovering the purpose of the crystal she carried and the power it held. She had come too far to turn back, had faced too many dangers to let this one stop her. She pressed on, her feet moving quickly, her mind focused on the goal ahead. Yet, with each step, The air grew heavier, the shadows deeper, and the pulse of the crystal grew stronger, almost urgent, as if it were calling to something in the dark, as the path ahead began to narrow. The trees closed in tighter, their branches twisting and intertwining above her like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. The air grew colder, and Anya's breath turned to mist in the chill, the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel the presence now, not just around her, but within her, a strange pull that seemed to guide her deeper into the heart of the forest. Her instincts screamed at her to stop, to turn around and flee from whatever waited in the darkness, but she refused. Shaha! She had come too far, and the answers were close now. She could feel them. The crystal pulsed again, stronger now, and the shadows seemed to shift in response, as if the very forest itself was alive with the power that had been awakened. Ahead, the path opened into a clearing, bathed in the pale light of the moon. In the center of the clearing stood a figure, cloaked in shadow, its features hidden in the darkness. Anya's heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively reached for the crystal, its light now blazing brightly, casting away the darkness around her. The figure did not move, did not acknowledge her presence, but Anya could feel its eyes on her, watching, waiting. She stepped forward, the ground beneath her feet shifting, as if the very earth was alive, reacting to her every move. The figure did not speak, but Anya could feel its presence pressing against her, a weight that seemed to fill the air with tension. The crystal pulsed again, and the figure's shape began to shift, becoming more solid, more real. The shadows that surrounded it seemed to melt away, revealing a tall, gaunt figure draped in a cloak made of the very darkness that filled the forest. "You have come." The figure's voice was deep, resonant, and filled with ancient power. "But do you know why?" Anya stood her ground, her pulse racing as the weight of the figure's words settled over her. She knew why. She had always known, deep inside. She had come for answers, for the truth that lay hidden in the heart of the forest. She had come to unlock the power that had been sealed away for centuries, the power that now flowed through her, veins, and she would not leave until she had uncovered it. "I came to understand," Anya said, her voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at the edges of her words. "I came to find the truth of the crystal, of what it truly is." The figure seemed to contemplate her words for a long moment, its gaze unwavering. Before it finally spoke again, its voice now filled with a sense of finality. "You seek the truth, but not all truths are meant to be known," it warned. "There are consequences for unlocking what has been hidden for so long." The words sent a chill through Anya, but she did not falter. She had made her choice. The forest, the shadows, the power it had all led her here, and she would not turn back. "Now I understand," Anya said, her voice filled with determination. "But I must know. I must understand what lies within me, within this crystal." The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying her, and then, with a sudden movement, it stepped aside, revealing a doorway, hidden in the shadows of the trees. The doorway was small, almost imperceptible, but the power that radiated from it was unmistakable. Anya could feel the pull, the call to step through, to enter the unknown and unlock the secrets that lay beyond. She knew that whatever lay on the other side would change everything. But she was ready. Without another word, Anya stepped forward, the crystal glowing brightly in her hand as she crossed the threshold into the darkness beyond. The moment she passed through the doorway, the air shifted again, becoming colder, heavier, and the forest around her seemed to vanish entirely, replaced by an eerie, suffocating silence. She was no longer in the forest. She was no longer in the world she had known. She had entered the heart of the mystery, and there would be no turning back. The secrets she had sought were waiting for her, and it was up to her to unlock them. The air around Anya grew heavy as she stepped forward into the vast expanse of the cavern, the ancient energy of the place filling her with an overwhelming sense of awe and trepidation. The walls seemed to close in on her, yet she felt a strange pull, an irresistible force drawing her deeper into the heart of the chamber. She had crossed the threshold, leaving behind the safety of the world she knew, entering a realm where history and power merged into something both terrifying and beautiful. The symbols on the walls began to glow, pulsing with a life of their own, casting flickering shadows across the smooth stone floor beneath her feet. Each step she took seemed to echo in the silence of the cavern, the only sound her own breath, and a faint hum of energy that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. The deeper she ventured into the space, the more alive the cavern seemed, as if it were aware of her presence, watching her every move. And then, ahead, at the center of the cavern, she saw it, a pedestal, ancient and worn, standing against the backdrop of glowing symbols. Upon it rested an object, bathed in light, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. It was the source of the energy, the catalyst that had drawn her here. The crystal in her hand pulsed in response, its light flickering in time with the rhythm of the cavern. She reached out, her hand trembling as it hovered just above the object. A surge of power coursing through her as she felt its energy call to her, urging her to claim it. But she hesitated. For the first time, doubt crept into her heart. What if she wasn't meant to be here? What if she wasn't ready to wield the power that had been hidden for so long? But then the crystal in her hand pulsed again, a steady, reassuring beat that seemed to drown out the doubt, replacing it with certainty. This was why she had come. This was why the crystal had chosen her. With a steady breath, Anya stepped forward and placed her hands gently on the pedestal. The moment her skin made contact, a wave of energy surged through her, stronger than anything she had ever felt before. It was as if the very fabric of the world itself was unraveling, its secrets being laid bare before her. The cavern seemed to tremble, the symbols on the walls glowing brighter, their light intensifying until it was almost blinding. And then, like 1,000 memories flooding her mind at once, the truth was revealed to her. The crystal, she now understood, was not just an object of power. It was a key to unlocking the ancient forces that had shaped the world, to bending the very laws of nature to one's will. But with such power came great responsibility. The visions flooded her mind, civilizations rising and falling, wars fought over control of the crystal, and the countless lives lost in the struggle for its power. It was clear now the crystal was both a gift and a curse, capable of bringing about great change, but at a cost that had been hidden from the world for centuries. The choice was hers, and as the visions faded, Anya stood in the heart of the cavern, the weight of the knowledge pressing down on her. She could feel the power coursing through her veins. The crystal now an extension of herself, its energy intertwined with her own path. The path ahead was uncertain, and the burden of her newfound knowledge weighed heavily on her. But she knew one thing for certain. Her journey was far from over. The world had changed, and with it she had changed. The decisions she would make in the coming days would shape not only her own future, but the future of the world itself. The power of the crystal was now in her hands, and how she chose to wield it would determine the fate of everything she had ever known. As the first rays of dawn broke through the thick clouds, bathing the world in a soft, golden light, Anya stood at the edge of the cliff, the vast expanse of the forest stretching out before her. The air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the earthy scent of pine and damp soil, as if the land itself was awakening from a deep slumber. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves and sending ripples through the surface of the river that wound its way through the valley. Below. She stood still, her mind racing with the weight of what she had just experienced, the crystal. Its power, the choices she had to make. She could feel it now, deep within her, the energy that had surged through her in the cavern. It was no longer just an object. It had become a part of her, its power entwined with her very being. As she stood there, contemplating the enormity of her situation, a sense of quiet determination settled over her. She had known from the moment she had touched the pedestal that her life would never be the same. The world had changed, and so had she. But the truth was, she wasn't sure she was ready for what lay ahead. The visions, the knowledge that had come flooding into her mind, had shown her the extent of the power the crystal possessed. It was both a gift and a curse, capable of great good and unspeakable destruction. She had seen the civilizations that had once sought the crystal, the wars fought over it, the bloodshed and the loss. The weight of all that history pressed down on her, making her wonder if she could ever live up to the responsibility that came with such power. And yet, as she stood there, looking out over the vast landscape, something within her shifted. She realized that this was not a path she could walk alone. She needed help. She needed allies. The crystal had chosen her for a reason, but she knew that even its power could not save her from the challenges ahead. There were forces in the world far older and more dangerous than she could have imagined, and they were already beginning to stir. The shadows that had remained hidden for centuries were now creeping into the light, threatening to destroy everything she had fought for. Her heart raced at the thought, but she forced herself to calm down. There was no turning back now. Set. The journey she had started had only just begun, and the road ahead would be long and treacherous. But she would face it head-on, as she always had. She would find the allies she needed, gather the strength to face the challenges ahead, and use the crystal's power wisely. The sun had risen higher now, casting its golden light over the world. And Anya took a deep breath, feeling the energy of the earth beneath her feet. She was ready. The awakening had begun. It was time to move forward. With one last glance at the horizon, she turned and began her descent down the cliffside, the crystal pulsing softly in her hand, its light guiding her through the unknown. The world was waiting, and Anya was ready to meet it head-on, no matter what it had in store. As Anya journeyed through the dense forest, the feeling of being watched never left her. Every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot, seemed like an omen. The air was thick with tension, and the once peaceful surroundings now felt suffocating. The path ahead was unclear, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on her chest. She had left behind the safety of the cliffs, knowing that her purpose lay beyond the forest's edge, in the land of the Ancient Ones, where the secrets of the crystal were said to be hidden. But as the sun began to sink below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Anya couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. The silence around her felt oppressive, as if the very earth held its breath, waiting for something to happen. She pushed forward, her steps quickening, until she came to a clearing. In the center, a large stone altar stood, weathered by time, its surface covered in moss and vines. As Anya approached, the crystal pulsed faintly in her hand, its energy stirring within her. She hesitated, unsure of what to do next. The visions had been clear. This was the place where the crystal's true power would be unlocked, where the key to defeating the coming darkness lay hidden. But what was she supposed to do now? She stepped forward, placing the crystal on the altar, and as it made contact with the stone, a shockwave of energy rippled through the air. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the once still forest seemed to come alive, the trees groaning as though they were waking from a deep slumber. The crystal began to glow brighter, its light illuminating the clearing, and for a moment Anya felt as though she was no longer alone. The air crackled with energy, and in the distance she could see a figure emerging from the shadows. Tall, cloaked in dark robes, the figure moved with a fluid grace, their steps silent against the earth. As they approached, Anya felt her heart race, her instinct screaming at her to run. But she stood her ground, gripping the crystal tightly. "You shouldn't have come here, Anya," the figure said, their voice low and resonant, as if it carried the weight of ages. "Google, you've awakened something that should have remained buried." The words sent a chill down her spine, but she refused to back down. "Who are you?" she demanded. The figure stepped into the light, and Anya's breath caught in her throat. Before her stood a being, unlike any she had ever seen, an ancient being, with eyes that shimmered like the stars themselves, and a presence that seemed to command the very elements around her. They were both human and not, their form shifting and warping with the intensity of their aura. "I am the keeper of the crystal," they replied, their voice carrying a sense of ancient wisdom. "I have watched over it for centuries, ensuring that its power never falls into the wrong hands." Anya's mind raced, the implications of the keeper's words sinking in. The crystal's power. "It's not meant for me, is it?" she asked, the doubt creeping into her voice. "Not for you," the keeper corrected, "but for the one who is destined to wield it. The time has come, Anya. You are that one." Anya's heart skipped a beat. She had always known that the crystal's power was hers to wield, but now, standing before the keeper, she wasn't so sure. The enormity of the responsibility weighed on her shoulders like a heavy burden, and the fear of making the wrong choice threatened to overwhelm her. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What if I make a mistake?" The keeper's expression softened, their eyes filled with an ancient understanding. "No one is ever truly ready, Anya. But that is why you must trust in yourself. The crystal has chosen you, and it will guide you, just as it has guided all those who came before you." The keeper extended a hand, and for the first time, Anya saw the markings etched into their skin symbols that glowed faintly, as though they had been burned into their flesh by the very power they protected. The keeper touched the crystal, and in that moment, the world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them in the glowing light. "You must learn to control the power within you," the keeper continued, "but be warned. There are those who seek to steal it, to use it for their own ends. You will face challenges greater than any you have ever known. The storm is coming, Anya, and when it arrives, you must be ready to face it." Anya felt a surge of determination rise within her. She had known that this journey would be dangerous, but the words of the keeper only solidified her resolve. She would not let fear hold her back. She would not let the storm defeat her. As the keeper's form began to fade, their voice echoed in her mind. A final warning. The gathering storm is only the beginning, Anya. The true battle lies ahead, but you will not face it alone. Trust in your allies, and trust in the crystal. With those final words, the keeper vanished, and the clearing fell silent once more. Anya stood alone, the crystal pulsing softly in her hand, the weight of its power both a blessing and a curse. She had made her choice. The storm was coming, and she was ready to face it. But first, she had to find the others, the allies who would stand by her side. Only then would she be able to unlock the full potential of the crystal and face the darkness that loomed on the horizon. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Anya's fate was tied to the crystal, and there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she turned away from the altar and began her journey anew. The path ahead uncertain but filled with the promise of the unknown. The storm was coming, but so was she. The morning sun stretched lazily over the horizon, its golden rays spilling across the ocean and painting the world in a tranquil glow. But beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. Anya stood at the edge of the cliffs, her hand tightly gripping the crystal as if it were the only anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The wind tugged at her hair and the hem of her cloak, but she did not flinch. Her mind was far from the serenity of the moment. Her thoughts were consumed by the task that lay ahead. Care. The keeper's words echoed in her mind, the warning clear and unyielding. The storm is coming, Anya. The true battle lies ahead. She took a deep breath, drawing in the salty air and steadying her nerves. The world around her was calm, but deep within her, something stirred an energy unlike anything she had felt before. The crystal pulsed in her hand, its rhythm syncing with the beat of her heart. It was as though the crystal had a life of its own, and with every pulse, Anya felt a deeper connection to it. This connection was both a comfort and a burden. She knew now that the power of the crystal was far greater than she had ever imagined. It was not just a weapon. It was a force of nature, a tide that could either cleanse or destroy, and it was hers to control or be consumed by. As the waves crashed against the cliffs below, Anya closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had been on this journey for so long, facing challenges and making choices that would shape the fate of not only herself, but the world. Yet, despite the weight of it all, there was no turning back. Her destiny had been sealed the moment she had touched the crystal, and with each passing day, the pull of that destiny grew stronger. The storm, the darkness that had been chasing her, was not just an external force. It was a force within herself. It was her fear, her doubt, her hesitation. It was the part of her that was terrified of failing, of making the wrong choices, of losing everything she had worked so hard to protect. The weight of these fears threatened to crush her, but she knew that she could not allow them to control her. She had to face the storm within her before she could face the storm that was coming. Slowly, she lifted the crystal to her chest, feeling its energy course through her like a tidal wave. The energy was not just in her hand, but inside of her, flowing through every fiber of her being. It was like a fire igniting within her soul, a fire that could either burn her alive or light the path ahead. With a deep breath, Anya allowed herself to let go. She released her fears, her doubts, her insecurities. She let the crystal's power flow through her, not as a weapon to wield, but as a guide, a light in the darkness. As the energy within her began to calm, a sense of clarity washed over her. The storm was coming, yes, but it was not something to fear. The storm was a test of her strength, her resolve, and her willingness to embrace the power within her. She opened her eyes, and the world seemed to shift. The waves below seemed louder, more insistent, the wind more pressing. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Anya felt alive awake in a way she had never experienced before. The storm was coming, but it was no longer a threat. It was her awakening. With renewed strength, she turned away from the cliffs and began her descent toward the village below. She had made her choice. The journey ahead would be perilous, but she would not face it alone. There were allies waiting for her, allies she would need to stand against the growing darkness. As she walked, the crystal pulsed in her hand, a constant reminder of the power she now carried, the responsibility that weighed on her shoulders. But she no longer felt burdened by it. Instead, she felt empowered. The storm was coming, but so was she. She would face it head-on, not with fear, but with determination. The tide had shifted, and with it, so had her fate. The crystal would guide her, but it was her will, her strength, and her heart that would lead the way. She was ready, and nothing would stop her from fulfilling her destiny. The battle was not just against the forces of darkness. It was a battle within herself, and she was prepared to fight. The tide was turning, and with it, the winds of change were blowing. She had awakened, and now nothing would ever be the same again. As Anya stood at the threshold of the ancient ruins, the winds began to pick up, swirling around her with a ferocity that seemed to mimic the storm brewing within her. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of the moment. This was at the point of no return. The crystal pulsed gently in her hand, its soft glow lighting the path ahead, but the path was uncertain. Before her stood the temple, its stone walls weathered by time and the relentless forces of nature, but still standing tall and proud, a silent testament to the power it once held. It was here that everything would change, here where the final confrontation would take place. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped forward, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. And yet beneath it all, she could feel the ancient energy that still lingered. It was a power she had only just begun to understand, a power that had been dormant for centuries but was now awakening, just as she was. The storm that raged around her was not just of nature's making. It was the storm within herself, the clash of old fears and newfound strengths. Her journey had led her to this place, this moment, and now it was time to face the Tempest head-on. She moved deeper into the temple, each step echoing in the silence that seemed to stretch infinitely. The walls seemed to close in around her, but she did not falter. The crystal warmed in her hand, its glow intensifying as she approached the heart of the temple. It was here, at the center, where the final piece of the puzzle awaited. The storm. Inside her grew louder, her doubts and fears rising to the surface, but she pushed them down, focusing instead on the feeling of the crystal's energy coursing through her. It was a feeling she had not experienced before, pure, untainted power, and with it an overwhelming sense of purpose. The world outside seemed to fade, the howling winds and crashing waves becoming distant as she stood in the heart of the temple. Alone with her thoughts and the crystal, the temple, ancient and decayed as it was, still held a pulse, a rhythm that beat in time with her own. It was as if the very structure of the place was alive, connected to her, guiding her. The crystal's glow illuminated a small pedestal at the center of the room, and on it lay an object she had long sought, an ancient key, intricately carved and glowing with the same energy that now thrummed within her. She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the key, and as she did, the storm outside seemed to crescendo. The sky darkened, the winds howling in fury, as though the very forces of nature were protesting her every move. But she did not hesitate. With a steady breath, she lifted the key from its pedestal, feeling the power surge through her as the room seemed to shift, the walls vibrating with an energy that resonated deep within her bones. The crystal in her hand pulsed in response, its glow blinding as it became a beacon of light in the growing darkness. The key was hers, and with it, the power to unlock the future. The storm outside seemed to rage in fury, but within the temple, Anya felt a calm like never before. The chaos of the world, the storm of her own making, had all led her here, and now, standing at the heart of the temple, she felt no fear, no doubt. She was ready. She could feel the final confrontation approaching, the forces that had been gathering care for centuries closing in on her. But she was no longer the frightened girl who had first discovered the crystal. She had embraced the power within her, and with it, she had become something greater. The storm, once a symbol of chaos and fear, had transformed into a force of strength. The crystal's light shone brighter now, a steady, unwavering beacon in the darkening world. She had done what she had come to do, and now, with the key in her hand, she was ready to face whatever came next. As the winds outside howled louder, as the earth trembled beneath her feet, she knew that the true test was yet to come. But she was no longer afraid. She had found her strength, her purpose. She was the storm now, and nothing could stand in her way. The temple, the crystal, the key, it was all part of her journey, a journey that had led her to this moment, this place. The heart of the Tempest was not a place of destruction, but of creation. It was here that everything would change, and Anya was ready to be the change. With the key in hand and the crystal at her side, she turned toward the exit, ready to face the world that awaited her outside. The storm would no longer rage against her, would follow her, become part of her. She was ready for the final battle, the one that would decide the fate of all. And as the winds howled around her, Anya stepped forward, the heart of the Tempest beating in time with her own. As Anya stood at the precipice, her eyes still tracing the outline of the world she had helped reshape, she felt the weight of her journey. The land, once marred by scars of war and chaos, was now alive with potential. The world breathed in harmony once more, its balance restored through the sacrifices made. The choices she and her companions had crafted with each step forward. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of the earth's renewal. It was a sound that resonated deeply within her, a soft reminder of how far they had come. The night was now a distant memory, a shadow that had faded beneath the light of a new dawn. The final chapter had been written in their story, but the pages were not yet finished. There would be more challenges, more trials, but the fire that had burned within her was no longer one of fear and uncertainty. It had become a steady flame, one that could guide, protect, and lead with wisdom. Anya felt a hand on her shoulder, a gentle touch from a friend who had walked beside her from the very beginning. Lian, with a knowing look in his eyes, nodded toward the horizon. Together, they shared this moment, understanding that while their battle was over, their duty was just beginning. They had changed the world, but it was the responsibility of all to protect what had been built. "We've done it," Lian said softly. His voice, though low, carried the weight of years spent fighting, struggling, and hoping. He was weary, but there was peace in his words now. The wars had been fought and won, the greatest of battles had been overcome, and now they could finally stand together. As guardians of the future, Anya didn't respond at first, letting the calm seep into her soul. She had learned that sometimes silence spoke louder than words, and in that quiet moment, she knew everything would be okay. The land before her, once so full of pain and loss, was now full of possibility. It was a new beginning, one where they could heal the wounds of the past and forge a future that would be bright, filled with hope. "We've done it," she whispered, but this time she spoke for them all. The others, gathered beside her, stood in reverent silence. The people they had fought to save, the lands they had protected, were now theirs to shape. This was their inheritance, their gift to future generations. They had given the world a chance to heal, to breathe again, and now it was up to everyone to make sure it thrived. As the sun climbed higher, the light spilling across the fields, the gentle winds brushing against their faces, Anya took one last deep breath. She had the strength now to lead with compassion, to govern with fairness. The future, once uncertain, now felt full of promise. With Lian at her side, they turned away from the cliff's edge. They didn't need to look back anymore. Their journey had already written its place in the world's history, and now the future was theirs to create. As they walked forward, toward the village that awaited them. The world shifted beneath their feet. It was not the same world they had known before, the one filled with darkness, despair, and endless struggle. This world was different now. This world was hopeful. Anya knew that the end of one chapter was just the beginning of another. The battle was not just for survival, it was for something greater. She had not only unlocked the secrets of an ancient power, but had also unlocked the power within herself. She had learned that true strength was not in wielding power, but in knowing when to share it, when to protect it, and when to let it go. And as they walked toward the horizon, the world now quiet in its peace, Anya knew that her place in this new world had been earned, not through force, but through compassion and understanding. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to walk. With every step, they shaped the future. The sun set, and the stars filled the night sky, reminding them that though the road ahead was long, the light they had fought for would never go out. The chapter of their story had closed, but the legacy they had left behind would continue to shine brightly for all who followed. Together, they had built a new world. And with the dawn came a new hope, one that would live forever in the hearts of those who believed in the power of love, sacrifice, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And as the night embraced them once more, Anya felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. The story was complete, but the world was just beginning to write its next chapter. She had given everything for this moment, and now it was time to rest, knowing that the future was in good hands. The end was just the beginning. And with that thought, Anya closed her eyes, ready for the new world to unfold.